Story 1. My parents spent $80,000 on my twin. They told me, "You'll figure it out." So, I secretly won a six-figure scholarship and outsucceeded them all by 23. They believed that there was only one true daughter, even though Ava and I are twins. Unfortunately, that wasn't me. I became aware of the difference in their treatment of me from a young age. The newest, prettiest, and most sought-after items were always given to Ava. I acquired the dolls from the neighbor's kids, and she got the dolls. I got the dresses that had already been worn, and she got the dresses. My mother flew to console Ava, give her a hug, and try to convince her when she started crying. I was handed a paper napkin and sent off to play again when I tripped and scraped my knee. All I heard was, "You're a strong girl, Lena. Be patient." I realized as a child that I needed to do something remarkable to get attention. Ultimately, nobody saw my tears for no apparent cause. One of the most memorable incidents from that period comes to mind. About 5 years old, I was playing in the yard with Ava. She became frightened and began to scream when she attempted to scale a tall metal structure on the playground. To let her know it was all right, I climbed up and leaped off despite my own fear. Though Ava didn't even attempt to climb up, Dad came up to us first, hugged her, and told her she was a courageous girl. I had thought my parents would commend my bravery. "Be careful, Lena. You know you can hurt yourself," was all he said after giving me a quick glance. No admiration, no pride in myself. Our relationship may have been modeled after this for many years to come. They grew increasingly uninterested the more I attempted to demonstrate my worth. However, my parents would instantly praise Ava whenever she smiled or did something inconsequential. I kept my jealousy to myself. A child finds it hard to comprehend why he receives less affection. At night, I sobbed while holding the worn-out teddy bear that my grandmother Evelyn had given me. The only person who ever gave me a warm glance was my grandmother, Evelyn. We hardly ever saw each other because she lived in a different city. However, each time she came to visit, I felt the warmth that regrettably my parents were unable to provide. Everything became considerably more apparent when we started school. Ava's efforts were consistently commended. For instance, she had an unremarkable, flawed craft made of cardboard and paper. I got my first literary achievements at the same time, but my mother said, "This is just a masterpiece, Ava. How did you do it so beautifully? Oh, you're so clever." I won prizes in drawing contests and was recognized by my teachers for my short writings. However, this just elicited a frigid response at home. I sensed tightness in my mother's voice as she said, "Well, yes. Well done, Lena, but watch out. Don't get cocky." It was as though she didn't even want to acknowledge that I could succeed without their help. Since I knew it was pointless, I put a lot of effort into my studies and avoided grumbling and complaining. Ava and I brought in our report cards one day when I was around 10 years old. She received a few solid scores between C's and B's, whereas I received straight A's. When my parents saw my A's, they simply nodded and said, "Well, you're a smart girl. It's clear." They also gasped when they saw Ava's report card saying, "Wow, 3 B's. Great, Ava. We're proud of you." My heart sunk. As I recall, it appeared as though someone else had received the prize for my diligence, and this repeatedly took place. The void in our family became increasingly apparent as we grew older. My parents thought they needed to spend more time with Ava. She was more delicate, more sensitive, and more exposed. They also believed that I was capable of defending myself. In the same vein, "You'll figure it out yourself. You'll find a way out yourself," and so forth. I eventually came to terms with the idea that I wouldn't have much parental support. But this doesn't imply that I should give up. Conversely, it always encouraged me to move forward, even more obstinately, continually demonstrating my value to myself rather than to them. The issue of selecting a college came up as Ava and I were finally getting close to graduating. Both of us chose to major in accounting. Proved to be a remarkable coincidence. I enjoyed order and accuracy, which sparked my interest in statistics, money, and reporting. I never saw any particular interest in such disciplines in Ava, but my parents took this quite seriously when she remarked, "Well, this is a popular profession. And then we'll see." To ensure that Ava has nothing to worry about while she studies, they paid for her education in full and all at once. Allow her to concentrate on her studies. As soon as the topic of education funding came up, they said, "You're smart, Lena. You can probably get a grant and earn some extra money if necessary. You won't be lost." On the one hand, I was offended that they were spending so much money on my sister, and on the other hand, I had to work hard to get every scholarship and grant. On the other hand, this was what motivated me to keep going. I reasoned that I would demonstrate my strength if they were certain of it, in order to pay for at least some of the costs myself. I started to draft grant applications, submit applications for various scholarships, and search for student openings. Despite living at the same college in rather different ways, we both attended it. Ava occupied a large room on campus. She received money from her parents on a daily basis for everything from amusement to clothes and textbooks. She lived a happy and carefree life, attending parties and hanging out with her peers. After securing a small room in a dorm, I worked part-time in the library during the evenings and occasionally as a cleaner. I became a member of a modest program that charged kids to clean rooms. I occasionally cleaned the dorm's hallway floors. And I completed all of this during the times when the majority of my students were sleeping. And I read a ton of books on accounting, financial analysis, and taxes during the breaks I managed to get for myself. Despite my extreme exhaustion, I understood that this was the only way I could accomplish anything. No one is going to give me what I want easily. It went unnoticed by my sister. She would say almost pityingly, "You look tired, Lena. Maybe you should manage your time better instead of running around everywhere." Whenever we happened to cross paths in the cafeteria or on the playground in front of the building, I knew that this was my choice, so I would smile back, attempting to hide any anger or bitterness. An inner voice would tell me, "Hang in there, Lena. You have everything ahead of you." A few semesters went by after I made this decision. After settling down, I came to the realization that I needed to plan ahead for my career in addition to my primary academics. I therefore attended a number of internships. I acquired a job at a small auditing firm where I was officially on duty. I assisted with paper sorting, copied documents, and brought coffee. I gained priceless experience of absorption in the actual world in exchange. They gradually started letting me handle little jobs that called for specific abilities. I gladly accepted everything. Since such interns are typically recruited from more prestigious universities, many of our college's students not only didn't try to find employment there, but just assumed it was impossible. However, I asked for a chance by knocking on doors, and I was fortunate. I found out about the chance to prepare quickly and take some of the CPA examinations early toward the end of my first summer of college. I came to the realization that I could pass some of the tests before I graduated if I worked like a horse. And once more, nobody in my immediate vicinity thought that a typical student could accomplish this. But I had faith in myself. I was strong. I met Professor Whitaker at an elective around the same time. International financial reporting requirements were the subject of another course he taught. Despite the fact that the course was challenging and lengthy, I enrolled. "Lena, you have quite a strong base. Where did you study before?" he asked me after the lecture on the first day of lessons. "Well, not really anywhere in particular. I just read a lot, study, try to figure it out." "Do you like accounting?" "Yes, very much. I believe that order in numbers creates order in both business and in minds." He grinned and said, "What a surprising formulation. I'm looking for an assistant who could help me prepare materials, sometimes check students' work. If you're interested, let me know." "Of course, I'm interested. I'll be very happy." I returned to my room ecstatic at this new chance and joyfully called my mother. I was still holding out hope that some compliments would pierce their typically icy acceptance. My mom replied, "Well, that's good, Lena. But Ava told me that she was invited to a party at a professor's country house and there will be a lot of high society people there, so she has her own pride. You're both doing well." I let out a deep sigh. It was like this. My sister was attending a party while I was working as an assistant to an accounting professor. However, Mom and Dad were equally successful. Maybe this is how things will always be for them. I was waiting for the library to close one evening when I got an email. Informational letter on the Everett Sloan Scholarship was the subject line. I didn't instantly know what it was about when I opened it. In the realm of accounting, it proved to be a highly esteemed nationwide program. It is given out to just 5 students nationwide each year. Excellent academic performance, exceptional extracurricular activities, leadership abilities, professor references, and many more things are required. The Benjamin Ford Scholarship. I must admit that I never considered applying for this scholarship since I believed the requirements were too high. However, my portfolio must have been sent by Professor Whitaker himself. In order to prevent nervousness, he made a habit of recommending intelligent kids without prior notice. The email stated that because the committee was impressed with the sample of my accomplishments, I was being encouraged to submit a full application. After reading it multiple times while in disbelief, I finally decided I had to give it a shot. I kept my intention a secret from Ava and my parents. I had already learned my lesson by then. I am responsible for my own goals and accomplishments. In any case, they will either ignore it or think it is unimportant. Why should I witness their apathy once more? I spent a few weeks getting ready for the tournament. I had to finish a number of assignments, write an essay, turn in recommendations, and turn in all the paperwork. Professor Whitaker checked the material, offered guidance, and pointed out errors. I put my all into it. After that, I sent the paperwork and I forgot about it for a few months. My daily routine consisted of work, studies, internships, and getting ready for the CPA examinations. I didn't give myself a minute to unwind. I discovered a letter in the mail 3 months later after working another shift at the library. Well done. You are among the 5 Everett Sloan Scholarship winners. I closed my eyes and nearly sobbed as I read these sentences again and felt a flurry of emotions including pride, joy, excitement, surprise, and most significantly a sudden activation of that quiet voice inside of me that said, "You see, Lena, you can do it. You did it." I recognized for the first time that I could no longer be ignored, being seen as exactly what I've desired my entire life, despite the fact that this sounds a little cocky. On the inside, though, I felt tired in addition to proud. How about my parents? What are they going to do at this point? Will they even want to congratulate me? There was early notice of the award ceremony. Representatives from major accounting firms, investors, journalists, and educators from throughout the nation were expected to attend the event, which was scheduled to take place at one of the top colleges. My folks were asked to accompany me. This will be a special day for them. They will be able to see what you have achieved, the organizer remarked on the phone. Admittedly, I was hesitant. I was hesitant to invite them in part because I feared making another chilly remark or underestimating them. The stubborn inner child, however, still wanted to get at least a little pride from them. Consequently, I called the house number. "Hi, Mom. Remember how I told you I was entering this big competition?" Something like that. "Yeah. What's it all about?" Anyway, I won one of the most prestigious national scholarships in accounting. I'm invited to the award ceremony and they're asking me to bring my parents. "Really?" Mom called out to Dad, raising her voice. "Mark, come here. Lena is saying something about an award once more." She took up the phone. "When's the ceremony?" "In 2 weeks, Friday in the morning. It's in a different city, but I'll check with you to see what's most convenient for you. They want to see you there." Mom said, "Okay, we'll try to make it," in a tone that suggested she wasn't sure if it was worth the time. I felt empty as I hung up. All right, I told myself, let them see it for themselves. Even if they do come, then perhaps something will change. But my naive optimism had vanished. By now, I had hardened even more. The awards ceremony day finally arrived. I got to the university early and changed into my somewhat formal outfit, which was a modest black dress with a classic cut and understated embellishments. The other laureates, the men, were rushing about. All of us felt a little uneasy. We were informed that each name would be called when we were escorted into the hall where the ceremony was to be held. The university's director would bestow the prize after tallying the short-term accomplishments. Each of us found a spot in the front rows. As the hall grew full of visitors, I saw that Ava was seated beside our parents. My sister had a stylish handbag on her lap and was dressed in expensive clothing. Mom and Dad were somewhat perplexed, as though they were unsure of their own purpose in such a hallway. To avoid becoming sidetracked, I made an effort to avoid looking them in the eyes. I was prepared for life's most significant event. The ceremony finally started. One laureate after another was announced by the host. They heard eloquent biographical accounts. A tax accounting optimization program was developed by someone. Someone made a name for himself with international student projects. I tried not to become too excited and gave everyone a round of applause. It was then my time. The next student, ladies and gentlemen, is an example of resilience, discipline, and independence. The chancellor stated as he got to his feet. Meet Lena Carter. Her instructors describe her as a person of iron will and tenacity. She went from being a cleaner and a librarian to being among the best in her class without financial help from her family. The audience erupted in applause, and I heard other people rise. I felt a surge of heat travel through my body as I got up from my chair. I was on my way to the platform when I suddenly turned to look at my parents' expressions in the crowd. I didn't notice the typical pride in Mom's eyes, and she was seated with a chilly face. Dad appeared taken aback, as though he hadn't anticipated such a serious situation. Ava gave me a confused look that I thought was tinged with jealousy. Then, as if for the first time, I became aware that they were actually observing me. I took the stage. The chancellor gave me an award, shook my hand, and gave me a quick congrats. After we snapped a picture, I went back to my seat among the raucous celebration. After all those years of being disregarded, I felt as though fate had finally paid me back. In addition to Professor Whitaker, numerous academics and representatives from big businesses came up to me after the event. They gave me business cards, congratulated me, and inquired about my interest in an internship with their organizations. I grinned and silently exulted. Here it is, the fruit of labor. I nodded, and then I saw my parents and Ava approaching me. Suddenly, I saw the chancellor, who also approached me and whispered in my ear, "You have proven that family is not always the one who helps. Sometimes family is yourself. Don't forget that. Now all doors are open for you." I sighed when I saw them and braced myself for yet another chilly exchange. "Congratulations, Lena," Mom replied, attempting to smile. "But why didn't you tell me it was that serious? You're great, I guess." "Have you ever listened?" was my straightforward response. I believed my remarks contained more fatigue and relief from years of expectation than violence. Dad began to say something, and Mom scowled. "We always believed that you were capable of so many things, but we didn't know that you needed help. We thought you could handle it yourself." "You never asked if I needed help," I replied. "It suited you, too. Think that Lena can do anything. But, sometimes I want someone to support me, too." Mom gave Ava a perplexed look. She looked from me to our parents while standing quietly. Ava then attempted to interrupt. "Listen, Lena, I didn't know you were applying for this scholarship. I thought your college was paid for, too." "Really?" I asked, meeting her gaze. "Have you ever wondered how I pay for my studies and rent? Has it ever occurred to you that you and I live different lives?" Ava gestured helplessly. "I guess I was too busy with my own life." "Exactly, and you were all fine with it. However, I don't want to sort things out now. I don't need your approval anymore." I faced away from them. The main character generally breaks down in tears during such scenes in books, but I was more composed than ever. I was experiencing a lot of emotions, but they had nothing to do with my family. They were about me. I realized it all at once. At this point, I totally gave up on winning their love and gave up on the hope that they would one day realize how wonderful I was. The recipients were honored with a brief reception at the institution that evening. Teachers, students, investors, and a few parents attended. Mine remained as well. It was only at the refreshment table that I happened to run into them. A representative of a major auditing firm, one of the prospective employers, approached and stated, "Miss Carter, we'd like to discuss a possible job offer. We're impressed with your accomplishments and references. Can you come to our table?" At the other end of the room, I could see my family. Mom, Dad, and Ava stood there looking at me, humiliated but afraid to come close. I then approached the investors at the table and we started a lively conversation about the future, including the possibility that I would be given a starting job at the Boston office as a junior auditor. My objective was to go into a big city, a hip office, and start doing actual auditing. My parents made the decision to go to the scholarship recipients' dinner the next day. My mother tried to strike up a conversation throughout supper. Lena, we know we may not have been the most thoughtful parents, but we really do love you and Ava equally. Maybe we just haven't had our priorities straight. It's not about love, Mom. It's about how I've always felt like I had to earn your praise, while Ava always got it by default. I tried, but you didn't see it. It doesn't matter anymore. I'm no longer used to asking. With a sigh, Dad held out his hand as though he wanted to give me a shoulder pat. Forgive us, daughter. We didn't notice that you were suffering so much. I don't want to quarrel now. Just accept that everything is different now. I'm not offended. I'm just making a choice in my own favor. Ava fiddled with her napkin while sitting somewhat off to the side. She looked up at me every now and then as though she was still in shock that I was the same quiet Lena who was constantly on the receiving end of the stick. She was obviously not happy that I was the focus of attention in the place where she had always felt she belonged. And I could see bewilderment and a trace of envy in her eyes. I eventually accepted the Boston office's offer. A week after the ceremony, I was called to Los Angeles and Chicago by another big firm, but I ultimately chose New York. The huge city's speed and the chance to develop more quickly in a demanding setting drew me in. I kept packing my belongings slowly in anticipation of moving after the semester ended. My relationship with my family has deteriorated to nearly nothing since then. We occasionally give each other a call, but these are brief, courteous chats like, "How are things at work?" "Great. I have a project here." That's all. Okay. Well, we are happy. To be honest, I no longer felt the need to prove anything to my parents despite their attempts to communicate. Ava sent me a few texts, but they weren't meant to offer congratulations or acknowledge my accomplishments. Instead, they were a complaint that our parents started expecting her to be more independent after they saw that I could be self-sufficient. And this kind of made me laugh. As it happens, Ava found it impossible to live up to their prior expectations after my example upended their routine. I will never forget the first time in my life when everyone turned to stare at me when the chancellor called my name in the hallway. Without any special favors, money, or favors from others, I was able to accomplish this on my own and felt seen and acknowledged. Even now, when I work for a big firm and occasionally learn about new obstacles, this feeling gives me the courage to keep going. However, I find no challenge more terrifying than the years I spent attempting to get the attention of those who did not view me as a true daughter while living in my sister's shadow. Looking back on my life, I can say with certainty that there are moments when you just choose to love yourself instead of requesting affection. This does not imply that I have grown resentful or heartless. Instead, I feel really confident and at ease with myself. I'm prepared to assist others who might not have family support. I want them to know that if you have the will, the goals, and the faith in yourself, anything is possible. Anything is conceivable. You will figure things out on your own. Even if you were taught repeatedly as a child that you were intelligent and that you would not need assistance. Our mistakes and wounds give us strength. And occasionally, the love we didn't receive serves as the catalyst for our success. My parents did not attend the ceremony when I graduated and was given my diploma. They must have had something to do. "You can manage without us, right?" my mother asked. It was with a smile that I said, "Yes, of course I can." My grandmother, Evelyn, who had always been nice to me, contacted me a week later. She said, "I'm proud of you, Lena. You are a wonderful granddaughter. I wish I could be there with you, but you know, I'm always there in spirit." When she said that, I nearly started crying because I knew I wanted her to be the one to watch me go across the stage to get my diploma and stand there feeling more joy than I had ever experienced. However, she was already elderly and the trip would have been challenging for her. However, I was incredibly thankful to her for her call, which was the warmest moment of that day. Ava entered the room as I was packing my things for New York a few months after I graduated. I recall she had made the decision to come visit me and had taken her car to campus. She hadn't been there for a while, so I was taken aback. She entered, sat on my bed's edge, and made an effort to strike up a discussion. Lena, maybe you don't want to, well, go so far away. Our parents want us to be close. Ava, I replied quietly. My parents never cared what I did. Now they suddenly want me to be close. Sorry, but I have my own path. I'm just afraid that we don't talk anymore, Ava whispered as she picked at the edge of the pillow with her fingernail. We haven't really talked much anyway, Ava, and you know it. With a heavy sigh, she lowered her gaze and got to her feet. Then I noticed a sort of childlike bewilderment on her face. It was the first time in my life that I sensed my sister's insecurity. Perhaps she came to the realization that her happiness had been predicated only on the fact that our parents had fostered her as their favorite. As it turned out, she was just graduating from college and wasn't really sure what she wanted to do with her life, whereas I had made it to the next level and was receiving fantastic offers. At last, she said, "Good luck to you, Lena," and walked out of the room. I continued to stare at the closed door for a few more seconds, feeling uneasy. It was neither scorn nor rage. Instead, it was a subdued melancholy. We were twins when we were younger, able to laugh together without worrying about who was born 4 minutes earlier or later. However, life transpired in a way that caused us to grow up differently and change significantly as individuals. I was unable to revert to that naive childlike sense of unity. Despite being in the same family, we are now strangers. I fell into a mad work rhythm in New York. It was challenging at first. During my 10 to 12 hours at work, I prepared reports, learned new things, interacted with clients, learned new programs, and became proficient in the subtleties of auditing. However, I liked it. I like addressing challenging challenges every day and being there in the middle of things. I no longer waited for my parents to congratulate me on another accomplishment because I was confidently establishing a profession. Why am I in need of this? I personally witnessed the results of my efforts. On weekends, I would occasionally stroll across Manhattan, take in the towers, and reflect on how bizarre life can be. Would I have developed the same level of resiliency, stubbornness, and ambition if my parents had given me the same kind of support as Ava? Perhaps not. I am thankful that my route was not an easy one. It strengthened me and taught me that the greatest acknowledgement is the one you offer to yourself. It's been a few years. I've completed my coursework, acquired experience, and received a promotion. Naturally, my parents make an effort to stay in contact from time to time. "How are you doing, daughter? It's a shame you didn't come," is one of their messages, to which I merely respond, "Everything is fine, thank you." Ava occasionally appears on social media with pictures from parties, and she occasionally writes me emails in which she laments her lack of employment. She is furious when I tell her, "Send your resume to different places, take courses, and improve your skills." I find all this so boring. It seems that our paths have finally parted. I don't mind, though, that we don't talk much. It doesn't imply that I loathe or hate them. You just stop pleading for love and begin to choose yourself one day. I eventually came to the realization that I should live for myself rather than for the approval of others. Indeed, blood links constitute family. However, these connections were degrading and smothering me. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Parents accused me of an affair with my brother-in-law, threw me out, and tried to destroy my career. The shocking truth uncovered over the past 6 years. I have established a prosperous career as a senior programmer at a large software business. My parents insist on family values and sticking together, so even though I make more than enough money to live on my own in a wonderful apartment, I've been living with them. Although they have always been domineering, I persuaded myself that it was simply their expression of affection. The environment in our home has always been complicated. This is also where my sister, Emily, 32F, and her husband, James, 34M, reside. 3 years ago, James obtained a job close by, and our parents were overjoyed, so they moved back with her. With her ideal life, marriage, and grades, Emily has always been the golden child. The comparison began in our early years and has continued ever since. I love my sister, don't get me wrong, but sharing a home has been difficult. Since I work from home the majority of the time, my folks are always watching me. They keep an eye on who I speak to on video conversations when I start work and when I take breaks. They have persuaded themselves that this degree of engagement in my life is both required and typical. Even though my precise schedule is shown on the refrigerator, my mother frequently interrupts me in my home office during crucial meetings, saying she forgot I was working. Michael, my 29-year-old lover, lives across the nation. He has been tremendously supportive over our 3 years of long-distance dating, but he and our relationship were never accepted by my parents. They treat James as the son they never had and compare him to him all the time. They attack every aspect of Michael, including his choice to live on the West Coast, his work as a software engineer, ironically the same field as myself, and even his attire when we video chat. James has always been cordial, not only as his wife's sibling but also as a little sister. We had a good relationship, and I valued having someone who didn't criticize me all the time. He frequently defended me during family dinners when my parents began their routine comments about my life choices, as if he understood the burden I was under. Up until 2 weeks ago, everything was in control. With solemn faces, my parents summoned me into the living room. I was managing a group of developers on a significant software update during a pivotal project phase, so the timing couldn't have been worse. On my laptop, they said they discovered offensive texts that purportedly demonstrated my attempt to conduct an affair with James. I was caught completely off guard. The messages they displayed to me were obviously fake and completely out of context. Some appeared to be completely made up, while others were excerpts from business exchanges that had been altered to appear suggestive. I attempted to explain that I'm really in love with Michael and that James is like a brother to me, so I would never do anything like that. They wouldn't look. Even when I promised to show them my actual message history, they refused to pay attention. I've always envied Emily's happiness, my mother said, sobbing, and she should have anticipated this because of my rebellious nature. I was a disgrace to the family, according to my enraged father. In the midst of the largest project of my career, they gave me a 24-hour notice to leave the house, a 24-hour notice to pack up my entire existence. I called my grandparents in tears and desperation. They have always been my refuge and our family's sane voice. They immediately believed me after I showed them the actual mails and gave them all the details. They took me in, provided me with housing, and helped me get through this ordeal. In order for me to continue working, my grandfather even assisted me in setting up a makeshift home office in their spare room. My father was furious to learn that I was staying with them. When I wasn't there, he actually came to their house and yelled at them for enabling me and undermining his authority. My father became even more irate when my grandfather refused to back down and stood up for me, declaring he would never talk to them again. He stormed away. I was devastated to see my grandfather, who is normally composed, trembling with rage following that altercation. When my father began getting in touch with my place of employment, things got worse. He made outrageous charges about my inappropriate behavior and unstable mental state in emails he sent to my manager and the Human Resources Department. He even made an attempt to persuade them that I was giving competitors access to company secrets. Fortunately, my manager has been understanding, and my work history speaks for itself. However, the strain is having an adverse effect. It has been embarrassing for me to have to explain these private matters to my staff. Then, my granddad unexpectedly died yesterday. The agony is intolerable. He was more than simply my grandfather. He was also my confidant, my guardian, and the one who always had faith in me. The fact that my parents did not attend the funeral only makes it worse. They had left town. Later, when I was organizing my grandfather's funeral, I discovered through my cousin that they were actually on vacation, sharing photos from a beach resort on Facebook. Every happy picture they shared made my heart ache. Taking an emergency leave of absence from his job, Michael flew in to support me during this trying period. My parents appeared out of nowhere as soon as he got to my grandparents' house. As though Michael's presence was somehow improper, my father cynically inquired as to why he was there. I eventually lost my temper at that point. I asked them who they believed had taken care of all the funeral planning, who had supported Grandma during her most trying time, who had stayed up late planning the ceremony, calling family, and interacting with the funeral home while they were taking selfies on the beach. Then, in an unsettling development, my father's entire personality altered. A disturbing peace took the place of the rage in his eyes. He became oddly calm and said he wanted to forgive me for what had happened with James and let the past be the past. He said he would let me stay with Grandma, but only if he got what was rightfully his. I understood exactly what he was after. Therefore, I was horrified by the abrupt change in his demeanor. My grandfather had been quietly successful with his investments over the last few years. My father desired his inheritance because he had accumulated a sizable nest egg. He had the gall to come and demand money after everything they had done to us and after leaving us during the funeral. He was unaware, however, that Grandpa had anticipated this. While organizing Grandpa's study the day following the death, we discovered a note hidden in his desk drawer. All it said was, "Call Bob." Bob, who had visited him multiple times over the years, was both his lawyer and an old friend. We found out that Grandpa had left everything to me when we got in touch with him. I now owned every cent of his savings. Grandma would always have a place to live, protected from anyone who would try to take it away from her, thanks to the house being signed off to her. My father broke his cool exterior when I told him this, as he accused me of controlling Grandpa and turning him against his own son. His face flushed with anger. He went on a tirade about how he deserved his parents' money and how he had always supported them. He was the one who had left his family to pursue his greed, so it was almost comical that he was accusing me of deception. In an attempt to persuade me, my mother said things like, "Didn't you try to take away your sister's happiness? You now wish for us to suffer as well." However, I refused to back down. Grandpa had made up his mind, and I was going to respect it. I clarified that Grandpa had only recognized where their priorities lay and that Bob, his attorney, could confirm all I said. I also said that there was no conspiracy. The tension in the air was oppressive as they departed. As I watched them leave, I felt both relief and grief. Relief that Grandpa had kept us safe even when he was not around, and sadness that my connection with my parents had reached a breaking point. I'm now concentrating on reconstructing my life and caring for Grandma. Throughout it all, Michael has been amazing, offering consolation and support when I needed it most. However, I can't help but wonder whether there was anything I could have done differently to avoid all of this suffering. Read it. I realize this post is lengthy, but I had to get everything out. Everything has become more problematic because of the inheritance situation, and I'm worried that my parents might try something extreme. I would be grateful for any guidance on legal protection. Has anyone else experienced a similar situation? How did you respond to it? Update 1. Things took a turn for the worst a few days after my last update. Apparently not satisfied with simply pestering my workplace, my father has begun reaching out to our company's customers. I learned this when a representative from one of our largest clients pulled me aside in a virtual meeting to voice concerns about upsetting emails they had received about me. These emails were kindly forwarded by them. My father was methodically attempting to damage my work relationships after he somehow managed to obtain our client list. According to the email, I was a volatile individual who was stealing business secrets and taking advantage of older family members for financial gain. The fact that he disclosed information regarding customer projects that he shouldn't have known about is very troubling. Now, since he works for a partner company, I'm wondering if James was giving him false information. The legal department of my business has been engaged. In addition to the possible harm to my reputation, they are taking this extremely seriously because my father's activities are endangering business partnerships. My parents received a cease and desist letter from them, which only appears to have made them more angry. My parents have responded by launching a full-scale campaign against me on social media. In order to disseminate their story, they have made numerous phony personas in addition to publishing on their own ones. The stories they are narrating are getting more complex. They now assert that I have been deliberately deceiving my grandfather for years and that I somehow planned out his whole investing strategy to suit my own interests. They are unaware that I discovered something startling while looking through more of Grandpa's documents. Classic Grandpa, always the meticulous planner, had a secret compartment in his desk drawer that held a USB drive and a pile of papers, along with comprehensive documentation of what seems to be systematic tax fraud and money laundering through my father's real estate business. The USB drive included years' worth of email correspondence between him and multiple offshore accounts. I informed Grandpa's attorney, Bob, about these results right away. He wasn't surprised, which was an odd response. Grandpa had apparently been gathering this information for years, recording each dubious business transaction and suspicious activity. Even photos of meetings with well-known dishonest business people were included in the folder. Bob clarified that Grandpa had been assembling evidence but was holding off on taking action until the perfect time. A set of emails revealing that my father had been embezzling money from his own parents' accounts for years was the most upsetting finding. Probably thinking they wouldn't notice, he had managed to get access to their financial portfolio and had started taking little amounts out. Grandpa did notice, though, and instead of confronting him right away, he decided to record everything to examine all the evidence. Bob is currently collaborating with a group of forensic accountants. According to him, we have more than enough to possibly file criminal charges in addition to defending against any legal claims my parents might make. I have mixed feelings about this. While I desire justice, I still find it difficult to imagine my own father being charged with a crime. James's eagerness to return to my parents' house is further clarified by the evidence. He and my father exchanged a number of emails about business prospects that seem eerily similar to Ponzi scams. I'm beginning to question whether the entire charge that I attempted to woo James was a preemptive move meant to discredit me should I ever find out what they were doing. In the meantime, my mother has started calling my grandmother every day, alternating between threatening her and guilt-tripping her. The most recent strategy is asserting that my father's health is suffering due to the stress of my betrayal and that I will be held accountable if anything were to happen to him. On Bob's recommendation, my grandmother, God bless her, has begun recording these calls. We've put in new cybersecurity procedures and placed security cameras throughout the house to keep ourselves safe. Bob suggested that I freeze my credit and assisted me in securing all of my accounts. When my parents see their intimidation strategies aren't working, he fears they may attempt a financial retaliation. My job has been suffering due to the stress, but in a surprising turn of events, this has improved my standing inside the organization. My manager has been tremendously supportive after seeing the proof of my father's harassment campaign. My application for a completely remote job has been expedited, so I won't ever have to worry about working from my parents' house again. Throughout it all, Michael has been my pillar of support. In a spare room at my grandmother's house, he has assisted me in setting up a safe home office with backup systems and secured communications. We're also talking seriously about his moving to a job nearer to me, but I'm concerned that this would make my parents even more of a target. To help me cope with everything, I've started going to a therapist. She is assisting me in realizing that I am not to blame for anything and that it is acceptable to feel both love and resentment for my parents. Processing the knowledge that the folks who raised you are not who you believe them to be is a difficult process. We are currently awaiting the completion of the forensic accountant's analysis. Within a few weeks, Bob continues, we should have a good picture of the scope of my father's financial crimes. I'm getting ready for whatever might happen next. My parents, who know me well, will not tolerate this. I appreciate your prior support, Reddit. I never thought my family's drama would reveal something so significant. Has anybody else learned that their parents committed financial crimes? How did you decide whether or not to report them? I'd really appreciate some advice on this. Update 2. Emily arrived at our home this morning without warning. As I prepared myself for another altercation, I saw a broken lady instead of rage. Her normally flawless appearance was unkempt, and her eyes were red and puffy. She broke down in tears before I could even inquire what was wrong. She sobbed and told what had transpired. James had been in Chicago on a purported work trip. Emily had flown out to his hotel in order to surprise him. She believed a romantic gesture may help ease her feelings of insecurity over their relationship. Rather, she entered his room and found him with another lady. It wasn't the worst part, though. Emily insisted on seeing his phone during their heated argument. The whole story of our family was broken by what she discovered. The offensive messages that had caused me to be expelled? I never made them. To escape suspicion, James had kept one of his mistress's phone numbers under my name. Using my name as a front for at least 3 different women, he had been having several encounters. The most startling aspect of all was perhaps how our parents reacted when Emily told them this information. Rather than offering their heartbroken daughter assistance, they advised her to remain silent and try to resolve the situation with James. They cared less about Emily's happiness and more about keeping up appearances to spare the family the shame of a divorce. They even advised her to forgive him. Then Em found something much more unsettling. She discovered emails on James's laptop that showed he and our father had been involved in more than just family affairs. Together, they had established a number of shell corporations to conceal funds from investors and taxes. James has been directing contracts to these shells at exorbitant pricing by virtue of his position at his company. Accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands were found via the money trail. Emily discovered pictures of James having meetings with strangers, all of which were stored in a secret folder called Insurance J. James appears to have kept records of everything, most likely for protection against any attempts to expose him. Another realization dawned on me as Emily told me these specifics. Not only was the inheritance at the center of the recent harassment of my clients and workplace, but it was also a frantic attempt to discredit me before I might learn of their financial machinations. They thought I might eventually find their digital trail because I work in technology. My sister is currently residing at Grandma's house with us. She is working with Bob to document what she has discovered and has filed for divorce. In addition to harming James, the data she presented could have disastrous consequences for our father. She discovered certain transactions that were exactly in line with the documents Grandpa had been gathering. The irony of it all. For years, James had been living beyond his means, using the proceeds of these illicit operations to fund his numerous affairs. In addition to wanting to be near James's place of employment, they moved back in with our parents since they were having financial difficulties as a result of his extravagant spending on his covert life. Through all of this, Emily has shown incredible bravery. She has already discussed her findings with the FBI, who are especially curious about the financial fraud's global components. She has been informed by the investigators that this case may be worth millions of dollars. Our parents' approach has entirely altered. They are now attempting to argue that they were duped by James and were unaware of the true situation. However, the data points to a different conclusion. Documents we have discovered reveal that our father was the mastermind behind numerous of these plots, with James acting as the frontman for his business. Emily is suffering from the stress of it all. For the first time in our adult lives, we have been spending evenings discussing things, and she has begun visiting her own therapist. She has repeatedly expressed regret for not trusting me and for allowing James and our parents to influence her, since she was just as much a victim of their manipulation as I was. I have forgiven her. Grandma has been incredible during this entire ordeal. She said Emily needed the master bedroom more than anyone else at the moment, so she gave it to her. We've resumed having dinners as a family, just the three of us and Michael when he comes over. It's amazing how tragedy can unite people and forge new ties from the ashes of past ones. Our cooperation is complete, and the FBI inquiry is still going on. Our parents are still working to preserve their reputation in the neighborhood and have engaged pricey attorneys. But more people are discovering the truth every day. Our father's former business partners have begun to come out with their own accounts of dubious activities. Sometimes, Reddit, the reality is more amazing than you might think. I'm finally with my sister again, and we're stronger together than we were before. We're getting ready for what is probably going to be a protracted court struggle, but at least we're doing it together as a family. A true family founded on support and truth rather than deceit and manipulation. Has anyone else experienced a similar situation where revealing a single family secret revealed a whole network of dishonesty? How did you handle the fallout? Update 3. The pace of progress has exceeded everyone's expectations. The FBI intervened last Friday morning when my father and James were enjoying their customary business breakfast at their preferred high-end eatery. I will never forget the expressions on their faces as they were carried out in handcuffs directly in front of the city's most affluent business community. In an instant, their meticulously constructed image of prosperous business people fell apart. Teams attacked their offices, our parents' home, and a number of storage units we were unaware existed as part of the coordinated raid that took place in numerous locations at once. They discovered proof of a 3-continent money laundering scheme, offshore account details, and decades worth of fake documents. Over $50 million is the preliminary estimate of the whole scam. However, that wasn't even the most fulfilling aspect. Do you recall the pictures James had saved for insurance? As it happens, he wasn't the only one who kept records. 3 of his ex-girlfriends came forward with pictures, emails, and text conversations dating back years. They had been silently constructing their own case and were all aware of one another. The finest aspect? For months, they had been collaborating with the FBI. James's recent business travels were watched, and every transaction was recorded. As one might anticipate, my mother's response to the arrest was quite predictable. She made an effort to play the victim by saying she was unaware of their illicit actions. When the FBI disclosed that they had recordings of her actively engaging in money laundering through her charitable foundation, that story completely collapsed. All those lavish galas she held to raise money? Simple plots to wash up shady finances. There has been extensive media coverage. The story was carried by all local news channels and even by several national ones. Prominent businessman and son-in-law arrested in multimillion-dollar fraud scheme. The headlines continued to appear. Overnight, my father's meticulously cultivated reputation as a community leader and benefactor was destroyed. The reaction from their social circle was fast and harsh. Those who once admired them at charity functions now act as though they had never met them. Their church requested that they resign from all committees, and the country club canceled their membership. In an effort to protect their own reputations, former business partners are going out of their way to assist the authorities. James's business quickly distanced itself from the situation. He was fired right away, and they are completely assisting with the investigation, as it seems he had also been defrauding them by inflating contracts and keeping the difference for himself. His name has become poisonous in the sector, and his professional reputation has been utterly wrecked. What the forensic accountants at the FBI discovered made me laugh aloud. Grandpa left that property in the trust in Florida. It was more than simply a dilapidated house. It held the secret to their whole scheme. Grandpa had purchased it especially to serve as evidence after learning that it was being used as a front for money laundering. He was aware that the property inquiry would reveal everything if they attempted to challenge the will. Even from the afterlife, he played them like a chess master. James and my father both agreed to plea bargains last week. The punishment is severe. My father will serve 15 years in federal prison. James will serve 12 years, and all assets related to their crimes will be forfeited. For the remainder of their lives, they will both be making restitution. Next month, my mother will be sentenced to 8 to 10 years in prison for her involvement in the money laundering conspiracy. After all of this, Emily is stronger than ever. She started her own business with the settlement, which was the little money left over after asset forfeiture once the divorce was finalized. We've never been closer since she moved into a comfortable apartment close to Grandma's house. Our parents worked very hard to sever the sister link, but it has since become indestructible. There was more karma to come. Do you recall how my parents attempted to ruin my reputation in the workplace? The board of my organization was so pleased with my handling of the matter that they elevated me to the position of Director of Security Operations. I now oversee a group of people that work to stop the exact type of scam that James and my father perpetrated. Last month, Michael relocated here, and we recently purchased a home a few blocks away from Grandma. By the way, she's doing fantastically. She used her experience to help others by starting a support group for families impacted by financial fraud. What about the valuable social standing of my mother? When I last heard from her, her old pals were openly avoiding her while she was shopping at the bargain grocery store. Her friends have made it apparent that she is no longer welcome in their group, and her expensive jewelry and clothing have all been confiscated. According to Reddit, justice isn't always served without flawless karma. Despite going through a lot, my family has emerged stronger, closer, and wiser. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who helped me along the way, and to everyone who has experienced similar betrayals in their family. Never give up. When the truth finally surfaces, it's a magnificent moment. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I gathered the courage to ask my girlfriend to include another girl during our act. Asking her to have another girl join was the worst decision of my life. I shouldn't have done it on Valentine's Day of all days, but I did, and there's no turning back. It was around this time last year when my wife said to me, "Happy Valentine's Day, darling. I have a surprise." I replied, "It's a threesome." I meant it and she knew it, partly from my facial expression and partly because it wasn't the first time I had brought it up. In retrospect, Valentine's Day probably wasn't the best day to mention it again. She had never been very receptive to the idea, but she hadn't completely ruled it out either. When she got home from work later that night and offered me a threesome, I was pleasantly surprised. "You were right. My surprise is a threesome," she said with a seductive smile. "The best wife in the world. That's why I bought you this," I said, handing her a bouquet of flowers and a Valentine's Day card. "Oh, happy Valentine's Day," she said, kissing me. Looking back, I'm not even sure why I wanted a threesome in the first place. My wife and I had a perfectly great sex life, just the two of us, and logistically, 3 people sounded complicated. But I'd never done it before, and it was one of those things I wanted to tick off my bucket list. "Then, who are you thinking of? For the girl, the third?" I asked. "That's a surprise," she replied. "Get ready to go out in 15 minutes. Suddenly, my heart started racing. Goosebumps covered my body. Finally, it was happening, I thought to myself, and very soon. I ran to the bedroom to pack whatever one brings to a threesome, but I was immediately perplexed. While searching for condoms in the room, I realized that after being married for a few years, I wasn't going to find any. So, I settled for a bottle of cologne and my sexiest boxer briefs. I stuffed them in a backpack and waited patiently by the door. "I've never seen you so excited to leave the house," my wife remarked as she slung an unusually large bag over her shoulder. "Oh, you'll find out very soon," she replied, joking with me. "Now, what are you waiting for?" I did as she asked me to. I got into the car and climbed into the driver's seat while she locked up the house. "The motel," she said, entering its name into the GPS once she was finally in the car. "That place isn't exactly romantic." I should have noticed it by the way she said it, but I was too excited, too distracted by what was about to happen to catch any nuance in her voice. About 20 minutes later, we arrived at the motel. My wife checked in under our name and chose a room. When we entered the room, I almost expected to see someone inside, a woman chosen by my wife, lying on the bed waiting for us. But when we turned on the light, the room was empty. A small, rundown motel room full of stuff. My wife must have noticed my judgmental look. "Don't judge a book by its cover. For what we're doing, only the bed matters," she said as she closed the door behind us. "She'll be here any minute now," she added, and hearing those words thrilled me. I ran to the bathroom to freshen up, and when I came out, my wife had already let in our guest, our third. There, sitting at the foot of the bed in nothing but lingerie, was a blonde woman who was in the midst of kissing my wife. Upon hearing me enter, both of them stopped and turned to look at me. "Of course, don't stop on my account," I said. My wife stepped back and sat on a chair next to the bed. "You two go first. I want to watch," she said. While Brick's nervous that after fantasizing about this moment for years, I wouldn't be able to act, I thought to myself. The woman took my hand and led me to the bed, where she turned me onto my back, jumped on top of me, and began kissing me. It was at that moment that I felt my wife moving around in the room behind us, but I was too aroused and too distracted by what was happening to think. Then I caught a whiff of something. I wondered what it was, but before I could look around to see what might be causing it, the woman looked at me and smiled in a way that made my heart race even faster. I was already nervous, anxious, trying to process that this moment, which once felt like a distant dream, was actually happening. She ran her hands over my chest with a soft, inviting touch, and for a moment, everything else faded away. My wife, sitting beside us, watched with a satisfied expression, as if she were savoring every second of an experience that had once seemed impossible. The next few minutes were intense. Everything flowed naturally, without awkwardness or hesitation. I didn't know if it was the adrenaline, the excitement of the moment, or the unexpected chemistry between the 3 of us, but each second felt like a revelation. My wife, who at first said she just wanted to watch, eventually joined in, and at that moment, I felt like nothing could be more perfect. It was as if we were completely in sync, knowing exactly what the other wanted. I had never seen her like this before, so completely immersed in the moment. When everything was over, we lay there, exhausted. The motel room was silent, except for the faint sound of the TV playing in the background, which we didn't even remember turning on. The blonde woman gathered her things, gave us one last playful smile, and kissed each of us on the cheek before leaving. As soon as the door closed, I turned to my wife and held her hand. "That was incredible," I said, still trying to catch my breath. She smiled, her eyes shining with excitement. "Even better than I imagined," she replied. We got dressed slowly, taking our time. I felt like I had achieved something I never thought possible. The ride home was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence where words weren't needed. I held her hand the entire way, feeling more connected to her than ever before. When we got home, it was already late at night. We showered together, sharing knowing smiles, and got into bed. Just before turning off the light, she turned to me, still with that lingering excitement in her expression. "I have a special request," she said, hesitating slightly. I smiled, curious. "Anything, love." She took a deep breath before speaking. "I want to do it again, but with someone else." I frowned, confused. "Someone else?" "Yes," she murmured, biting her lip. "But not another woman." The air suddenly felt heavier. My body tensed before I even realized it. "What do you mean?" I asked, a strange feeling forming in my chest. She looked away for a moment, as if gathering the courage to continue. "I want to try it with another man." The shock hit me instantly. It was like a bucket of ice-cold water had been dumped over me. My heart, which had been racing with excitement just moments ago, was now pounding for an entirely different reason. "Wait, what?" She sighed and squeezed my hand. "You got to experience something new tonight, and it was amazing. Now I want to know what that would be like for me. I want to feel what it's like from the other perspective." My mind was spinning. I didn't know how to respond. Just moments ago, everything had seemed perfect, like we had unlocked a new level in our relationship. But this was too much. "Are you serious?" I asked, hoping she was joking, but her expression was unwavering. She wasn't joking. "Yes," she said. "I want to know what it's like to be with another man, and I want you to be there, just like I was tonight." I felt a knot in my stomach. "You want me to watch or join in?" she said with a shrug. "But yes, I want you there with me." My mind refused to process what I was hearing. My chest tightened. I looked at her, searching for any hesitation, any doubt in her face, but there was none. She looked determined. "You want another man after what we just experienced?" She squeezed my fingers between hers. "It's not about wanting someone else, love. It's about the experience. You got yours tonight, and I loved sharing that with you. Now I want the same for me." I stood up from the bed without saying anything. I walked to the bathroom and gripped the sink, breathing deeply. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and saw the turmoil in my own eyes. What was I supposed to say? How was I supposed to react? After a few minutes, I returned to the bedroom. She was still sitting on the bed, watching me expectantly. "So?" she asked. I let out a humorless laugh. "So what? Do you really think this is fair?" She frowned. "You wanted to be with another woman, and I agreed. Why is this any different?" I ran a hand down my face, trying to contain the anger that was slowly rising inside me. "Because I never wanted to see another man touching you." She crossed her arms. "And I never wanted to see you with another woman. But I did it because I love you and I wanted to make you happy." Silence filled the room. I had no response. She stood up and walked over to me. "Think about it," she whispered. "I'm only asking for the same thing you asked of me." I couldn't answer. I turned around and left the room. I spent the entire night on the couch, unable to sleep, my mind racing. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me, made coffee, talked about her plans for the day. But I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. Something inside me had changed. Something had broken. And the worst part was knowing there was no going back. I sat on the couch, staring at nothing. My heart was pounding, but not from excitement or desire anymore. It was a mix of anger, disbelief, and something I didn't want to admit. Fear. Fear that this conversation had crossed a line. One that once passed, had no way back. I had spent the entire night without sleeping, replaying every moment in my head, from the second she made that ridiculous request to now, where I sat alone trying to process the fact that maybe I didn't know my wife as well as I thought. The sun started to rise, and I heard her footsteps coming from the bedroom. I didn't move. I had no energy left to pretend things were normal. She walked into the living room and looked at me, surprised to see me there. "Did you sleep here?" she asked, as if nothing had happened. I took a deep breath before answering. "Yeah." She sat next to me and took my hand. Her touch, which once felt comforting, now felt cold. "Look, love, I know what I asked caught you off guard, but it doesn't have to be a big deal. We can talk about it." I finally looked at her. My eyes were heavy, not just from exhaustion, but from everything I was feeling. "Do you really not see the problem with this?" I asked, trying to keep my frustration in check. She sighed, like she had been expecting this reaction. "You're acting like I cheated on you, like I did something wrong. All I did was tell you what I wanted, the same way you told me what you wanted. What's the difference?" I felt my blood boil at the comparison. "The difference?" I let out a humorless laugh. "The difference is that I never asked you to do something that would make you uncomfortable. I asked about a threesome with another woman because I knew deep down it wouldn't hurt you. You agreed, you were there with me, and from what I saw, you even enjoyed it. But what you're asking me now is completely different." She rolled her eyes. "Different because I'm a woman and you're a man? Because you think only men should get to have these experiences?" "That's not it." I stood up, running my hands through my hair, trying to think straight. I don't want this. I don't want to see another man touching you. It doesn't excite me, it doesn't make me happy. In fact, just thinking about it makes me feel betrayed." She frowned, looking offended. "Betrayed? Then I should have felt betrayed last night too, right? Should I have been angry watching you with another woman?" I crossed my arms, shaking my head. "It's not the same thing. You were there, we did it together. It wasn't just me with someone else. But now you want to bring a man into our relationship. You want me to watch, and I just can't accept that." She was silent for a moment, watching me as if trying to figure out my reaction. Then she finally spoke. "You're being a hypocrite." I laughed bitterly, unable to believe what I was hearing. "A hypocrite?" "Yes," she said firmly. "You wanted to have fun with another woman and I accepted it. But when I want something similar, you lose your mind. That says a lot about you, you know? You're twisting everything." I snapped, unable to hold it in anymore. "I love you, but what you're asking, it's not just something that makes me uncomfortable. It's something that would break me. I can't imagine watching you with another man, not after everything we've built together." She crossed her arms and looked at me with frustration and disappointment. "So you expected me to accept what you wanted without question. But when I want something, suddenly it's a problem? You think you get to decide what's fair and what isn't?" I ran my hands over my face, feeling the desperation growing inside me. "It's not about rules, it's about respect. I respected you. I respected your boundaries. I would never force you into something that hurt you. But now here you are, insisting on something that you know would destroy me. How is that fair?" She stayed quiet for a moment. I thought for just a second that maybe she would understand, that maybe she would realize this wasn't just some irrational reaction, but something that was genuinely hurting me. But then she took a deep breath and said, "If it were the other way around, you'd expect me to accept it." I felt a lump in my throat. "So what if I don't agree? You're going to do it anyway?" I asked, looking her directly in the eye. She didn't answer right away. She bit her lip, glanced away for a second, then met my gaze again. "I don't know," she finally said. "But I do know that if you really loved me, you'd at least think about it." A bitter taste filled my mouth. "So now my love for you depends on how much I'm willing to endure watching you with another man?" She didn't answer. She just looked at me with a neutral expression, like she was waiting for my reaction. But in that moment, something inside me simply broke. "I don't think I can do this anymore," I murmured, almost not realizing I had said it out loud. Her eyes widened in shock. "What?" I stared at her, and for the first time since this conversation started, I felt like there was nothing left to say. I can't be with someone who thinks love is measured like this. I can't be with someone who, after everything, still thinks this is fair. The silence between us was suffocating. She opened her mouth to say something, but stopped, like she had finally realized that nothing she said would change how I felt. I stood up and walked to the bedroom to pack my things. My heart felt heavy. My hands were shaking. Part of me wanted her to stop me, to say she was wrong, that she regretted it, but she didn't say a word, and that told me everything I needed to know. She didn't care, and I couldn't stay any longer. After leaving the bedroom, still feeling the weight in my chest, I sat down on the couch, not knowing what to do. My mind was in chaos. I knew the conversation we had wouldn't just disappear from my thoughts. I needed a second opinion. I needed to know if I was really overreacting. So, without thinking too much, I grabbed my phone, opened Reddit, and made an anonymous post. "My wife and I recently had an experience with another woman. It was something I had always wanted, and she agreed. Everything went well, but now she has asked to have the same experience, but with another man. She wants me to be there, watching or participating. I told her that it makes me uncomfortable and that I don't want to, but she thinks I'm being a hypocrite because I had my chance and now she wants hers. Am I wrong for not wanting this? Am I being unfair?" I posted it and put my phone down. I sat there staring at the wall, waiting for responses, believing that at least some people would understand my side. But when I opened the app a few minutes later, the comments had started flooding in, and most of them weren't on my side. "Yes, you're a hypocrite. You wanted another woman, but now that it's her turn, you refuse. If the roles were reversed and she had refused the threesome, you'd probably call her selfish. You had your fun, and now you want to deny her the same thing. Grow up. She did it to make you happy, and now you should do the same." With every comment I read, my frustration grew. Was I really the villain in this story? How could no one see the difference? How could no one understand that this wasn't just about fairness, but about the fact that, to me, this wasn't just uncomfortable, it was devastating. I sat there staring at the screen, watching hundreds of people judge me like I was the worst person in the world, as if I were selfish or even manipulative. But one comment in particular really got to me. "If you had said no to the threesome from the start, you'd have an argument. But you wanted it, you insisted, and she agreed. Now that it's her turn, you say no. That's not love, that's control." I felt my stomach sink. I knew it wasn't about control. I knew I wasn't saying no just to be selfish. But somehow, seeing so many people judge me so harshly made me question if I had really been fair. I put my phone away and sat there, unmoving, thinking. The only person who could give me a real answer was her. I needed to understand what was going on in her mind. I needed to know how far this went. I got up and walked back to the bedroom. She was sitting on the bed, scrolling through her phone, not even noticing me at first. When she looked up at me, she didn't seem surprised, but she also didn't look guilty. "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice as calm as possible. She put down her phone and looked at me. "About what?" she asked, like she already knew. I sat at the edge of the bed, rubbing my hands together, still feeling the tightness in my chest. "I made an anonymous post about what happened," I started. "I asked if I was wrong for not wanting this." She raised an eyebrow, clearly curious. "And what did they say?" I swallowed hard. "That I'm a hypocrite. That if I accepted a threesome with another woman, I should accept this with another man. That I'm being unfair." She nodded slowly, as if she wasn't surprised. "And now," I sighed, feeling the weight of every word before saying it. "I still don't want this, but I need to understand better." Her eyes lit up for a moment, maybe with hope, maybe with relief. "What do you want to know? Do you already have someone in mind?" She didn't answer immediately. The silence that followed was the worst part of this conversation. I wanted her to say no, that it was just a vague idea, but her silence said more than words ever could. "You do?" I stated, feeling my chest tighten. She looked away, biting her lip, as if carefully choosing her words. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it." I cut in, my patience running thin. She took a deep breath, crossing her arms. I had someone in mind in case you agreed. I didn't want to mention it before knowing your stance on it." "Who?" I asked, my voice colder than I expected. She hesitated. 1 second, 2. "A friend of mine." I felt my entire body tense up. "A friend?" "Friend," I repeated as if I hadn't heard correctly. She nodded slowly. "Someone I trust. Someone who knows how to respect boundaries." I stood up, feeling my head spin. "How long have you been thinking about this?" I asked, refusing to believe this was something new. She ran a hand over her face, like she was tired of the conversation. "Since before our threesome." A chill ran down my spine. "You wanted this even before we brought another woman into our relationship?" She closed her eyes for a moment and nodded. "Yes, but I knew you'd never agree if I asked first." My heart sank. This whole time, all of this, and she had already planned this in her head. "So you only agreed to the threesome because you wanted to convince me afterward?" She opened her eyes and looked at me seriously. "I agreed because I love you and wanted you to have that experience. But yes, deep down, I also hoped it would help you understand my side." I couldn't respond. My chest was burning, my throat was tight. I didn't know what was worse. The fact that she already had someone in mind, or the fact that she never wanted the threesome for the reason than I thought. The weight of the truth crashed down on me in a way I hadn't expected. I never had a choice. This was always a one-way street. I just didn't realize it until it was too late. The day arrived. I had spent the entire week trying not to think about it, convincing myself that somehow I could get through this. But deep down I knew. I knew that nothing in the world could prepare me for what was about to happen. From the moment I woke up, my stomach was in knots. I couldn't eat, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept replaying that conversation, that confession. How she had already had someone in mind, a friend. She was excited. She didn't even try to hide it. I could see it in the way she was getting ready, the way she carefully picked out her lingerie, more deliberately than usual. I wanted to scream, to ask if she couldn't see what she was doing to me, but every time I opened my mouth to say something, I just couldn't. Was it fear, shame, or just the simple fact that no matter what I said, she had already made up her mind? So I just sat there, watching as she prepared herself for something that clearly meant more to her than anything we had ever done together. The doorbell rang. My throat went dry instantly. My heart started pounding. She looked at me through the mirror and smiled. "Everything's going to be fine," she said, as if she was reassuring me. I didn't respond. She walked to the door and opened it, and then I saw him. This guy wasn't normal. That was my first thought. Tall, broad shoulders, a physique that looked sculpted by gods. He wasn't just handsome, he was imposing. I felt insignificant just looking at him. And my wife, the way she looked at him, the way her eyes lit up like she was seeing something she had always wanted but never dared to admit. I should have stopped it right there. I should have stood up and said enough, but I didn't. I froze, trapped between the pride of not wanting to admit that this was tearing me apart, and the fear that if I spoke, she would look at me with disappointment. I was weak, and that weakness kept me in place. The two of them walked past me like I was just another piece of furniture in the room. The guy shook my hand firmly, smiling as if we were old friends. "Nice to meet you, man. Nice to meet you." I wanted to laugh, but I just nodded, trying not to show what I was really feeling. They walked to the bedroom. She didn't even look back, and I just sat there. For a moment, I thought maybe I could ignore it. Maybe if I turned the TV up loud, maybe if I put on headphones, maybe if I just pretended that nothing was happening, it wouldn't be so bad. But then I heard it. I heard things I had never heard before. I heard my wife like I had never heard her before, and it destroyed me. Every sound was a stab to the chest. Every laugh, every gasp, every moan ripped another piece of my dignity away, leaving me sitting there, hands gripping my head, feeling my soul shatter. And then came the final blow. Her voice. "Oh my God! You're huge!" I stopped breathing. My entire body went numb. I already knew. I already knew this guy was different. I already knew I had no chance of competing. But hearing it killed me. I wasn't enough. I never was. And now I knew it. I don't know how long I sat there, listening, suffering, dying inside. But eventually there was silence. And then laughter. They were talking as if nothing had happened. As if this was just another casual moment in their lives. And me? I was done. When they finally came out of the bedroom, she was glowing. Glowing in a way I had never seen before. The guy patted me on the shoulder before leaving. "Thanks, man, that was amazing." I couldn't respond. The door shut behind him. And then the worst part. She looked at me and smiled. "Babe, I had no idea it could be like that." She said it with a sparkle in her eyes, with genuine happiness, as if she expected me to be happy for her, as if everything was perfectly fine. But I was never the same again. Never. I stood there, staring at her, searching for something in her face that would tell me that what I had just witnessed wasn't real, that maybe somehow it hadn't meant as much to her as it seemed. But I found nothing. All I saw was a woman glowing with satisfaction, seeming as if tonight had been a gift from the gods, as if I wasn't even there. The silence between us was suffocating, but she didn't seem to notice. "Babe," she started, taking a step toward me. I instinctively stepped back. "No." My voice was low, but it carried a firmness I hadn't expected. She frowned, confused. "What's wrong?" That was the last straw. "What's wrong?" I let out a hollow laugh. "Are you seriously asking me that?" She blinked, as if trying to process my reaction. What happened here tonight wasn't right. My chest burned with frustration. This should have never happened. She crossed her arms. "But we both agreed to it." "No, you agreed to it. You made this decision. You pressured me into accepting it." She rolled her eyes. "You knew this could happen. You insisted on bringing another woman into our bed, and I accepted it. But now that I want something, suddenly it's a problem. This was completely different." "Different how? Because you're a man and I'm a woman? Because only you get to have your fantasies fulfilled?" I clenched my fists, feeling my anger rise. "Do you seriously think that's the issue?" She sighed. "Then what is the issue?" "The issue is that you never wanted this for us. You didn't want an experience for our relationship, you wanted him. You already had him in mind before this was even a discussion. This was never about equality or about exploring together. It was about getting what you wanted." She fell silent for a moment. I knew I had struck a nerve, but instead of admitting it, she tried to justify herself. "That's not true." "Oh, really? Then tell me, did you even think about me at any point? Because I was there, sitting in that living room, listening to everything, listening to you say things you've never said to me, watching you react in ways you never have with me." She bit her lip, searching for words. It was something new, something different. Of course it felt intense. "Different?" I cut her off, my voice dripping with bitterness. "This wasn't different. It was better for you. Much better. So much that you didn't even care whether I was there or not." She looked away, unable to respond. "It wasn't like that," she murmured. "Of course it was. And the worst part? You don't even realize what you've done. You don't even understand that you just broke me." She rolled her eyes again. "You're overreacting." That was it. That was the final push. Overreacting. I let out a bitter chuckle. "You destroyed everything we built, humiliated me in the worst way possible. And I'm the one overreacting?" She stared at me coldly. "I didn't cheat on you." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, really? Then tell me, what was this?" "It was an experience," she insisted. "Something within our relationship. If I had done this behind your back, then it would have been cheating." I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. "Oh, I see. So if I put a knife in your hand and warn you that I'm going to stab you, does that mean it's not murder?" She scoffed, impatient. "You're twisting everything." "No, I'm not." My voice was steel now. "Do you want to know the difference?" The difference is that in our threesome, I was still with you. I wanted to share an experience with you. I didn't want another woman. I wanted us to have something together. But you weren't there for me. You only agreed to it because deep down you already knew what you wanted for yourself. She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped, because she knew I was right. She had wanted this long before she ever suggested the first threesome, and that hurt the most. I can't stay here. My voice was hollow, the weight of those words crushing me. Her eyes widened. What? I took a deep breath. I can't be with someone who did this to me, who went through everything that happened tonight and didn't feel a shred of regret, who had the nerve to smile at me after it was over as if I should just accept it. Don't be ridiculous, she snapped, her voice shifting, sounding desperate now. You're going to throw away our relationship over this? No, you threw it away when you decided I wasn't enough. She stared at me, searching for something in my face, some hesitation, some doubt, but there was nothing left. I was broken and she knew it. Babe, please, let's talk. Let's think about this. I love you. I looked at her one last time, and I realized that I didn't love her anymore. Not after what had happened. Not after seeing her glow for another man. Goodbye. Her lips parted as if to say something, but no words came out. I grabbed my things and I walked out of the home that had once been mine, never to return. I didn't look back. I didn't let myself hesitate. Every step I took felt like closing an entire chapter of my life, but the worst part, I didn't know if I would ever be able to start again. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Someone posted a love confession about me on the college's confession wall, but then my roommate's boyfriend left a comment claiming I had been with every guy on campus. Furious, I was ready to call the police. My roommate begged me to forgive her boyfriend, promising he would apologize publicly on the confession wall. However, before that apology could happen, a compromising video began circulating in the student group chats. Everyone was saying I was the girl in the video. The college summoned me for a meeting and suggested I take a leave of absence. When I returned home, my parents refused to acknowledge me as their daughter. I lost everything. Depression consumed me, and with endless rumors, I withdrew completely, losing the strength to continue. When I opened my eyes again, it was the day my name first appeared on the confession wall. Someone posted a picture of me receiving an inspirational scholarship award on the campus confession wall. The caption read, "Shout out to Emma Harper from the class of 2023. You're absolutely stunning. If you don't have a boyfriend, could we get to know each other?" Within minutes, the post had already racked up dozens of comments. Emma isn't just beautiful. She's incredible. Feels like she stepped out of a fairy tale. Wow. Does anyone have her number? I want to meet her too. I scrolled through the comments with a neutral expression until a long comment by someone named Daniel Brown caught my attention. What's wrong with you guys? How can you even like Emma? Don't you know she's the campus bike? Anyone with money can take a ride. Pretty much every guy here has been with her. Someone quickly replied, "Who is this lunatic? Why is he spreading rumors like this?" But Daniel didn't stop. That comment seemed to provoke him further, and he fired back with another long post. "Rumors? Are you kidding me? I've seen it with my own eyes. She hooked up with someone in broad daylight. They didn't even bother going to a hotel, just found a corner and went at it. She only fools the freshmen with her innocent act. Everyone knows her scholarship and top student awards were earned through improper means." My hands trembled as I read the comment. The phone slipped out of my grasp and hit the floor. "Emma, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," my roommate asked, picking up my phone. Her eyes scanned the screen before she gasped. "Abby, why is your boyfriend commenting like this on the confession wall?" Abby Miller looked confused and leaned over to check. Her face turned bright red as she read the comments. By now, the rest of my roommates had read the entire thread and were furious on my behalf. "How can Daniel say something so disgusting? This has to be slander, right? Emma, you should report him to the police," one of them said indignantly. "No, don't call the police," Abby stammered, visibly flustered. "Emma, I'm so sorry. There must be some misunderstanding. I'll talk to him right now and make sure he deletes those comments and apologizes publicly. Abby looked earnest, almost pleading. If I hadn't lived through all of this before, I might have believed her and let her handle it. But in my past life, Daniel never deleted those comments. He never apologized either. Instead, when a certain video went viral, he mocked me and said, "See, what did I tell you? Emma Harper really is someone who doesn't deserve respect." Without a word, I stood up, grabbed my phone, and walked out. When I reached the boys' dorm, I ran into Daniel just as he was leaving. I sprinted toward him, blocking his path. "Is what you said true?" Daniel froze, startled by my sudden appearance. "What?" I held up my phone, showing the comment on the screen. "You said I've been with every guy on campus. Is that true? When did this happen? Where? How many people? I don't remember any of it. So tell me, is it true or not?" Daniel's face shifted instantly. He turned pale, then bright red, and for several seconds he couldn't form a coherent response. It wasn't until Abby finally caught up, slightly out of breath, that she intervened. She gave him a sharp nudge and whispered, "Apologize." As if snapping out of a trance, Daniel stammered, Sorry, Emma. I didn't mean it. It just slipped out. I shouldn't have said anything." "So you're saying it's true?" My voice rang out, sharp and loud. "You're spreading lies about me. That's unacceptable." My words instantly drew a crowd. People stopped in their tracks, phones appeared in hand, and they began messaging others. Within minutes, we were surrounded by a wall of curious faces. Daniel looked panicked, his confidence evaporating under the pressure. "Emma, I misspoke, okay? None of it's true. You didn't sleep with every guy on campus. I was just being an idiot." He fumbled for his phone and deleted the comments in front of me. "See, they're gone. You're better than this. Just let it go. Okay?" Abby chimed in, trying to smooth things over. "Yeah, Emma. Daniel didn't mean any harm. He probably confused your picture with someone else's. Just let it go, it's not a big deal." "Confused my picture with someone else's? A photo, maybe, but my name?" "My name was in the comments, repeated over and over." He couldn't have mixed it up. The two of them were clearly working together, trying to brush this off as nothing. Narrowing my eyes, I scrolled to another comment. "Fine, so you're saying the part about me being with every guy on campus isn't true, but what about this? You said you saw me hooking up in broad daylight. Where exactly was that?" "On campus grounds." Daniel's face turned red again, his smile tight and nervous. "Come on, just pretend I didn't say that either. Okay?" I was out of line. I shouldn't have said anything. My boldness clearly struck a nerve. Daniel's face twisted with anger, and he finally snapped, "You want the truth? Fine. A month ago, you and your faculty advisor were in the grove behind campus at noon. You thought no one would see because of the holiday, but guess what? Someone recorded a video." He finished with a self-righteous air, glaring at me as if I were the one in the wrong. When I didn't respond immediately, his confidence grew. "See, I gave you a chance, but you had to keep pushing." But Daniel didn't notice how Abby's expression shifted the moment he mentioned the exact time and place. I stared at Daniel, my breathing heavy as I fought to control the rage burning in my chest. His face carried a mask of false confidence, but it was clear he was beginning to feel the weight of his actions. He stood there as if he held some sort of power over me, but my determination to not be crushed again only grew stronger. Abby, standing beside him, looked at me with a mix of guilt and unease. I couldn't trust anyone there anymore. "So, Daniel," I said, my voice steady though my heart was pounding, "you're saying someone recorded this video? Who is this someone? Where's the video? I want to see it now." He hesitated, stumbling over his words as if scrambling for an excuse. I don't know, it wasn't me who recorded it. I just heard rumors." I let out a bitter laugh that echoed among the gathering crowd. "Rumors? You destroyed me over rumors." I stepped closer and he instinctively stepped back. "You spread lies about me through disgusting accusations, and now you're telling me you don't have any proof? That you don't even know if it's true?" The silence was deafening. I could feel the eyes around us, watching, waiting, but no one dared to intervene. Abby stepped forward, trying to place herself between us. Emma, let's resolve this calmly. Daniel already apologized and he'll delete everything. There's no need to make this a scene. I turned to her, my anger shifting in her direction. Calmly, Abby, he destroyed my life last time. Do you think a simple sorry fixes this? He dragged my name through the mud, made my parents hate me, took everything I had, and you stood by, asking me to be patient defending this piece of trash? No, Abby, not this time. She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off before she could say a word. And you know what's funny? I continued, locking eyes with Daniel. You seem to know a lot about the exact location and time this supposedly happened. How are you so sure? Were you there? Or are you the one who recorded it? His eyes widened, clearly startled by the accusation. Me? No, of course not. He shook his head frantically. I just heard someone say it. Okay? I wasn't there. Then who was? I demanded, crossing my arms. Who told you? Or is that a lie too? Daniel started to sweat. He looked at Abby as if expecting her to help him out, but she seemed even more nervous than he did. That's when I realized Abby knew something. She knew more than she was letting on. Abby? My voice turned cold. You seem to know more than you're saying. Are you going to speak up? I don't know what you're talking about, she said quickly, but her face was red, and she avoided my gaze. You're lying. I stepped closer, ignoring the murmurs from the crowd. You've known about this from the start, haven't you? That's why you're so desperate for me to forgive Daniel. Because you're involved in this mess. She took a step back, shaking her head. No, I swear I didn't know he was going to post that. But you knew about the video, didn't you? My voice grew sharper and she froze. You knew, Abby. Who recorded it? Were you there? Did you do it? Stop it, Emma! She shouted, tears welling up in her eyes. I didn't do anything, okay? It wasn't me. Then who is it? Pressed. She looked at Daniel, and his expression gave everything away. He avoided eye contact, shrinking further under the weight of the confrontation. Oh my God! I whispered, as the realization hit me. It was you, wasn't it, Daniel? You recorded the video and spread it around. I didn't spread it around, he shouted back, his voice shaking. I just sent it to a few people. I didn't know it would blow up like this. My blood ran cold. The anger was almost unbearable now. You destroyed my life for fun. My voice was low, but filled with contempt. You wanted to humiliate me. Why? What did I ever do to you? He didn't answer. He just stood there, a coward, while I felt the weight of everything rushing back. The jokes, the stares, the rejection from my family. But this time, I wasn't going to let it crush me. Listen to me, Daniel, I said, my voice stronger, full of resolve. I'm taking this to the administration. I'm going to the police. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. You think you can destroy someone's life and get away with it? Not this time. Before he could respond, I turned to the crowd. And all of you? I asked, glaring at the people filming on their phones. Do you think it's fun watching someone's life get destroyed? Keep recording. You'll want to remember this when he's expelled. Without waiting for a response, I walked away. Each step felt heavier, but deep inside, there was an unshakable certainty. This time, it would be different. I wouldn't stay silent. I walked away from that confrontation with a single thought in my mind. This time, things would be different. They weren't going to destroy me again. Daniel, Abby, and everyone who laughed at my expense or contributed to my downfall would finally face the consequences. It wouldn't be easy, but I had something I didn't have before, knowledge of the truth, and I was ready to wield it like a weapon. The first thing I did was march straight to the college administration. I already knew that in the past, they had chosen to silence me and suggest I take a leave of absence. But this time, armed with foresight and evidence, I was ready for them. I stormed into the dean's office without an appointment, ignoring the secretary who tried to stop me. Emma Harper, what's going on? The dean asked, startled by my sudden entrance. What's going on? I said firmly. Is that one of your students, Daniel Brown, has posted defamatory lies about me on the campus confession wall and admitted to distributing a compromising video. I expect the college to take action before I'm forced to escalate this myself. He stared at me, trying to process the weight of my accusation. Do you have proof of these claims? He asked, his tone skeptical, almost dismissive. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots of Daniel's comments on the confession wall, along with recorded conversations I had with him and Abby. I also mentioned that there were multiple witnesses who had seen Daniel admit his actions. His expression shifted, discomfort creeping into his face, as he realized this couldn't be swept under the rug. We'll launch an investigation immediately, Emma. You have my word, he said, suddenly cooperative. It was almost laughable how quickly his tone changed. He wasn't helping me out of compassion, but because I had undeniable evidence that could tarnish the college's reputation. And this was only the beginning. While the administration started their investigation, I went straight to the police. This time, I didn't hesitate to file a formal report against Daniel for defamation, harassment, and the distribution of sensitive material. I explained everything in detail, laying out how he had used the video to publicly humiliate me. I also mentioned Abby, who clearly knew more than she was letting on. Next, I hired a lawyer. It was a bold move, but I decided to invest my savings into hiring the best legal professional I could find. He listened to my case with unwavering focus and assured me we would pursue justice to its fullest extent, holding Daniel and any accomplices accountable. As the situation escalated, word began to spread across campus. Daniel's original confession post had been deleted, but many students remembered his comments and were buzzing about my confrontation with him. Some approached me to offer their support or share information. It was through one of these students that I discovered a game-changing piece of evidence. A student from the film department, someone I barely knew, contacted me directly. Emma, I was near the Grove on the day they're talking about. I think I might have something that could help you, he said. He showed me footage he had taken that day. It wasn't the incriminating video Daniel had circulated, but it was enough to prove that I wasn't there at the time and place Daniel claimed. The video clearly showed another person wearing clothes completely different from mine, making it impossible to confuse me with the individual in question. This evidence was my saving grace. Armed with this new evidence, the walls around Daniel began to crumble. The college summoned him for a disciplinary hearing, where he was confronted with the screenshots, witness testimonies, and the video that proved his lies. He tried to defend himself, claiming it was just a joke, but no one was buying it. The college announced his expulsion, citing gross violations of the code of conduct. As for Abby, she couldn't stay silent any longer. When the investigation revealed that she had known about the video and had done nothing to stop Daniel, her reputation was destroyed. Her friends abandoned her, and rumors began swirling about how deeply involved she had been in the whole ordeal. She left the college shortly after, her life in shambles. With Daniel gone and my name cleared on campus, there was still one more hurdle: my family. Returning home, I braced myself for the confrontation I had avoided for so long. When my mother opened the door, her face was tight with tension. "What are you doing here, Emma?" she asked coldly. I took a deep breath before responding. "I'm here to show you the truth. I never did any of the things they said I did. It was all lies spread by cruel people, and now I have the proof." I spent the next few minutes explaining everything, showing them the evidence and detailing how I had fought to clear my name. They listened in silence, and by the end, tears were streaming down my mother's face. "Emma, we were wrong. We should never have believed them. I'm so sorry we didn't stand by you," she said, her voice trembling. My father, always the quieter one, gave me a small nod. "You've shown more strength than any of us ever could. We're proud of you." Despite the lingering pain, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. They still had a long way to go to earn back my trust, but this was a start. Time moved on and I rebuilt my life. I finished my studies, gained recognition for my resilience, and eventually began working for an organization dedicated to helping victims of online harassment and defamation. I turned my pain into purpose, fighting to ensure no one else would have to endure what I had. As for Daniel, I heard that he struggled to get accepted into another college. His record of misconduct followed him everywhere, and he was forced to take on temporary jobs while trying to piece his life back together. Abby, on the other hand, disappeared completely. I don't know where she ended up, and frankly, I don't care. I didn't just survive. I won. And this time, justice was served. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My name's Jake. I'm 28. And if you told me a year ago that my life would be flipped upside down by my own family, I probably would have laughed it off. I always thought I had tough skin. I grew up with a mom who knew how to use words like knives and a younger brother who somehow always got away with everything. But I never imagined I'd reach the point where I'd walk away and not look back. I always thought no matter what, I'd endure it. Be the responsible one, the provider, the rock, as my dad used to say, when things were good. But there's only so many times you can be stepped on before you start wondering if maybe you're the one making it too easy. Started on a Thursday evening, just a regular day, if I'm honest. I come home from work late as usual. I work in finance, managing client portfolios, and with the market the way it's been lately, my hours have gotten longer. I don't mind the grind. I've always worked hard. It's how I paid off Mom's car loan 2 years ago, how I helped cover Daniel's, my younger brother's, college tuition when his scholarships fell through, how I covered the mortgage payments when Dad's hours were cut last fall. Not that I ever made a big deal out of it. I just did what needed to be done. That's what family's supposed to do, right? That night, though, I walked through the door and knew something was off. Mom was in the kitchen, arms folded, glaring at the empty sink like it had personally offended her. Daniel was sitting on the couch with his usual smug look, flipping through channels and not even acknowledging me. I asked what was going on and Mom just snapped. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice already sharp. "Work," I replied, dropping my keys into the bowl by the door. "Same as always." She turned toward me like I'd said something offensive. "You don't think we could have used some help around here? Dishes are piling up and the trash hasn't been taken out." I blinked. "Daniel's been here all day. Why is this suddenly my job?" That's when Daniel chimed in without even looking up from the TV. "Because you're the one who thinks he's the man of the house. Act like it." I looked between the two of them, genuinely stunned. I didn't know what was happening. It wasn't about dishes or trash. It was something deeper, a resentment that had been simmering beneath the surface for a long time, apparently. "I've been paying the bills," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm not trying to throw it in anyone's face, but you can't treat me like some unpaid intern around here." That's when Mom exploded. She stepped forward, finger pointed, eyes wide with rage. "You think throwing money around makes you important? You're not doing us favors, Jake. You're just a burden with a wallet. You're not family. You're an obligation." It was so loud. I swear even the neighbors must have flinched. I stood there stunned, the room spinning slightly. I've heard her say cruel things before, usually during arguments with Dad, but never like this. Never directed at me so plainly, so violently. She wasn't done. "You think we need you? We'd be better off without you dragging everyone down." I didn't say a word. Not right away. I just stood there feeling my face flush and my heart pound in my chest. There was a dull ringing in my ears, like my body was trying to drown out her words, but they still landed, each one. And Daniel just smirked like he was finally watching a scene he'd been waiting for. I turned around and walked up the stairs. My hands were shaking and my throat was tight, but I moved on autopilot. I packed a single suitcase, just the essentials. A few clothes, my laptop, the external hard drive with all my work documents, and a small lockbox with my important papers. I didn't say goodbye, didn't slam a door. I just walked out. That night, I drove to a cheap motel 2 towns over and stayed there for the weekend. On Sunday, I signed a lease for a 1-bedroom apartment closer to work. It was small, quiet, and mine. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. The next few weeks were eerily quiet. No calls, no texts. I half expected Mom to reach out, maybe even apologize in her roundabout way, but nothing came. Daniel didn't check in either. It was like I'd been scrubbed out of the family photo album, and nobody even blinked. And as much as it stung, a part of me was relieved. There was peace in that silence. An ache, sure, but peace. Then 2.5 weeks after I left, I got a text from Daniel. "Why isn't the mortgage covered this month?" I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to take a moment and really feel the weight of what I was about to do. For so long, I've been the one quietly holding the family together financially. I covered the $2,100 mortgage every month, set up the autopay myself, and never asked for recognition. And now they were realizing what it meant for me to be gone. I typed back one sentence, "Guess you're better off without me," and I hit send. The message was delivered. Read. But no reply came, no follow-up, no apology. Just that long, drawn-out silence that suddenly felt a lot heavier on their end than mine. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the screen, waiting, but nothing came. That silence said everything. And that's when I realized they finally felt the absence they thought they wanted. I didn't hear anything from them for the next 2 days. No texts, no calls, just silence. At first, I thought they were trying to play it cool, maybe convince themselves they could handle things on their own. But by the 3rd day, the dam started to crack. It started with a voicemail from Mom. Her tone was unusually polite, strained, like she was trying to wrap her bitterness in bubble wrap. She said something about a little hiccup with the mortgage and asked if I could help out just for this month. As if the last conversation hadn't happened, as if I hadn't been called a burden and told I wasn't family. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a request, almost like a demand wrapped in fake niceties. I didn't respond. That's when Daniel texted again. This time, his tone was much less polite. "You're seriously going to ignore Mom? This is your responsibility, too." My responsibility? I laughed out loud. I hadn't spoken to either of them in nearly a month. They told me they were better off without me. And now that the financial safety net was gone, suddenly I was back to being needed. I didn't reply to him either, but I knew this was only the beginning. The following week, I got a call at work. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked it up anyway. "Jake," came a familiar voice. "Dad." Now, to be clear, my dad isn't usually part of the equation. He's quiet, distant, the kind of man who watches the chaos from the sidelines and occasionally throws out a "let's all calm down" like that ever fixed anything. But he was calling now, and that alone was strange. "Hey," I said cautiously. He sighed. "Listen, I know things have been tense." "Tense?" I repeated, biting back a laugh. "Is that what we're calling it?" He ignored the sarcasm. "Your mother's been under a lot of pressure. She didn't mean what she said." There it was. The old family script. Sweep it under the rug. Pretend the emotional landmines didn't explode. Move on like nothing happened. Except this time I wasn't in the mood to read my lines. "She meant it, Dad. And so did I. When I left." There was a pause on the other end. I imagined him rubbing his temples like he used to whenever he didn't know how to respond. "We're behind," he admitted. "Finally. If the bank doesn't get something soon, we could lose the house." There it was. The truth. "Why isn't Daniel helping?" I asked flatly. Dad sighed again. He says he's still waiting to hear back on a few job applications. He's been helping around the house. Helping around the house, right? Probably still sitting on the same couch, flipping through channels, and ordering food with the last of the joint account money. I wanted to scream, not because I was angry, though I was, but because this cycle had gone on for so long. I'd spent years quietly holding everything together while they drained me dry. And now, the second I stepped away, it was all falling apart. And somehow, I was still the one expected to fix it. "I can't help you," I said. Calm, final. Dad didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. "They're going to blame you. You know your mom, Daniel. They'll say this is your fault." "I know," I said. "Let them." And I hung up. For the next week, things escalated quickly. I heard through a mutual family friend that Mom had tried to borrow money from a cousin, someone I hadn't seen in years. Word was spreading fast. Jake walked out. They were saying, "Left them to drown." But no one mentioned the years I covered their bills, or the times I skipped my own vacations to make sure Daniel had books and tuition paid. No one mentioned the nights I came home from work at 10 p.m. and still fixed the leaky sink, or the fact that I was never once told thank you. No, all they saw was that I was gone and everything was falling apart. Then came the knock at my door. It was a Saturday morning, early. I just made coffee and was sitting on the balcony of my tiny apartment enjoying the silence. The knock was soft at first, then louder. I opened the door and there stood Daniel. He looked rough, tired, dark circles under his eyes, and wearing the same hoodie he used to borrow from me in college. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me like he wasn't sure if I was real. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not moving. "Can we talk?" he said quietly. I stepped aside, but I didn't offer him a seat. He walked in, looked around the apartment like he was trying to understand what a life without them looked like. "Place is nice," he said. I didn't respond. "I didn't know things were this bad," he finally muttered. "Mom didn't tell me how far behind we were." I raised an eyebrow. "She didn't tell you, or you didn't ask?" He flinched just slightly. "She said we were fine, that you'd come back eventually, that you always do." I let that sit in the air for a moment. Let him feel the weight of it. "Well," I said, "I'm not coming back this time." He nodded slowly like he already knew. "She's scared. They both are. The bank called twice this week. I don't think we can keep up." "Then get a job," I said simply. He looked down at the floor. "I've been trying." "Try harder," I interrupted. "Figure it out, like I did." He looked up at me suddenly sharp. "It's not that easy." "No, it's not," I agreed. But it wasn't easy for me either. I just didn't have a choice. We stood in silence for a long while. Finally, he turned to leave. Just before he opened the door, he looked back at me. "Do you really think we'd be better off without you?" I stared at him for a moment. "I think," I said slowly, "you're finally finding out what that actually means." And with that, he walked out. The visit from Daniel didn't rattle me as much as I expected it would. If anything, it cemented something I've been trying to ignore. They weren't just angry. They were unprepared. For years, they lived in a bubble that I quietly held up from the shadows. And now that I wasn't there, the cracks were turning into fractures, and no one had a clue how to patch them. A few days after Daniel's visit, I started noticing more missed calls. My phone would light up while I was at work. Mom, Dad, even Aunt Lisa. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to give them the satisfaction of pretending nothing had happened. But curiosity got the better of me one night when I saw a number I didn't recognize. It was a voicemail from the bank. Apparently, Mom had tried to list me as a cosigner again without my knowledge. The automated message was a verification call asking me to confirm an application that had already been flagged as suspicious. I nearly dropped my phone. I knew my mother could be manipulative, but forging my signature, trying to drag me back into their financial mess through underhanded paperwork, that wasn't just toxic, that was desperate, and it was illegal. The next morning, I took an early lunch break and went straight to my bank branch. I spoke to a manager and had a long conversation about identity protection. We locked down all accounts with extra verification, flagged any attempts from certain addresses, and I filed a preliminary report regarding fraudulent application activity. I wasn't going to wait until someone ruined my credit to get serious. And still, they kept calling. Mom left another voicemail that night. Her tone had shifted again. No longer polite, but brittle and frantic. "Jake, I know you're upset, but this is serious. We could lose the house. Where do you expect us to go? Daniel's got nowhere. Your father's not well. We need you. You can't just abandon your family." I listened to the message on loop, each time hearing more of the subtext. Not a single apology. Not once did she say she regretted what she'd said to me that night. She didn't acknowledge calling me a burden. She didn't own up to anything. To her, I was the one who had turned my back on them because I stopped being useful. That's what I'd always been to them. Useful, convenient, a financial shock absorber. I sat in the dark after that, staring at the city lights through my apartment window, wondering how long it would take before they truly understood. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't playing a game. I had just stopped giving, stopped fixing, stopped enabling. The next breaking point came on a Tuesday evening when I got a call from Aunt Lisa. She never usually got involved. She was the distant type, never took sides, always stayed out of the family drama. But this time her voice was cold. "Jake," she said without greeting. "I just got off the phone with your mother. She says the mortgage company's sending notices, that the utilities might get shut off, that they could lose everything." "I know," I said calmly. There was a pause. "So you're just letting it happen?" she asked like the concept was foreign. I let the silence hang for a beat. "Lisa, did she tell you what she said to me before I left?" "She said there was a fight. She didn't give details." "Of course she didn't," I muttered. Then slowly, "She told me I was a burden, that they'd be better off without me." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "She said that." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "And she meant it. So, I gave them what they wanted." "Jake, I didn't know." "No one did," I said, "because I never made it a big deal. But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt." There was another silence, longer this time. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I'll talk to her, to your dad too. But you don't owe them anything. If they want you back in their lives, they're going to have to earn it." It was the first time someone in the family said those words to me, that I didn't owe them. It shouldn't have meant as much as it did. But it did. Later that week, I got a knock on my apartment door again. This time it wasn't Daniel. It was my father. I barely recognized him at first. He looked older. Not just in the way people age with time, but tired. His shoulders slumped like the weight of everything had finally landed. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. He stepped in, looking around with a kind of detached awe. "You did all this by yourself?" he asked. "I've always done everything by myself," I replied. "You just never noticed." He didn't argue, didn't even blink. He just sat down on the edge of the armchair and let out a slow breath. "I should have said something," he began a long time ago, "about the way your mom treats you, about how much we leaned on you." I waited. I didn't want another half apology. I wanted truth. "I let her push you too far," he continued. "I let Daniel get away with too much. And when you left, I think we all thought it was temporary, that you'd come back like always." I crossed my arms. "I'm not coming back." "I know," he said softly. "I just came to say I'm sorry for not being the kind of father you needed." The words hung there raw, unpolished. For once, there was no guilt tripping, no manipulation, just regret. Real quiet regret. "I'll figure something out," he said as he stood. "I just wanted to tell you that in person." And then he left. But the fallout, the real fallout hadn't hit yet because the house, the one I'd been covering for nearly 2 years, was about to go into foreclosure. And Mom, she wasn't about to take that news gracefully. He left without asking for anything else. No money, no help, no second chance, just that quiet apology, which honestly was more than I ever thought I'd get from him. And when the door closed behind him, I stood there for a while, unmoving, letting it all settle. The silence in my apartment felt different after that. Not heavy, not lonely, just peaceful. I went back to my routine. Work, groceries, gym, sleep. For the first time in my life, I wasn't juggling someone else's problems. I wasn't stressing about due dates on a mortgage that wasn't even in my name. I wasn't watching my bank account dwindle from someone else's mess. I could breathe, and I was finally starting to heal until the envelope arrived. It came on a Friday afternoon, tucked between junk mail and a flyer for discount teeth whitening. A thick official-looking envelope with the mortgage company's logo in the corner. At first, I thought maybe they'd sent something by mistake, some overdue notice still tied to my name from back when I'd made those payments. But it wasn't a mistake. Inside was a letter and a foreclosure notice. It was addressed to the current occupant of my parents' address, but my name was listed as a former payee. The final warning: payment hadn't been made in over 90 days. The bank was preparing to seize the property. Court proceedings were scheduled. They were out of time. And just like that, I knew the house, the home I'd grown up in, was done. The emotions hit harder than I expected. Not sadness, exactly. Not relief either. More like a strange mix of mourning and vindication. That house held every version of me. The kid who stayed quiet to avoid yelling. The teenager who tried to make everyone laugh so dinner wouldn't turn into a war zone. The adult who paid bills just to keep the lights on for people who never thanked him. And now it would belong to the bank. It felt like the end of a chapter or maybe the whole book. That weekend, I stayed in, watched some old movies, made pasta, kept things simple. I didn't check my phone. I knew they'd be calling. I knew that once the reality really sank in, the panic would start. And sure enough, by Sunday night, my phone had 23 missed calls, 11 from my mother. The voicemail she left me was unlike any other. Gone was the anger. Gone was the fake politeness. Her voice cracked like thin ice as she spoke. Jake, I didn't know what we were doing. I thought you'd always be there. You've always been the strong one. You always made it work. I know I said horrible things. I didn't mean them. I was angry. I was scared. She choked on the words. I was wrong. We were wrong. And now it's all gone. There was a long pause before she spoke again. They're coming next week. They're going to change the locks. We have to be out by Thursday. Daniel hasn't said a word in 2 days. Your father's barely eating. We don't know where to go. If you get this, please, Jake. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for, I don't know, something. Anything. She ended the call with a whisper. I'm sorry. I sat there on my couch holding the phone, staring at the wall like it might offer answers. But the truth was, I didn't know how to feel. I had waited years to hear those words. And now that they'd finally come, it didn't feel like redemption. They felt like closure because I had already moved on. On Monday, I got a text from Daniel. They're losing it. She cries nonstop. Dad just stares at the walls. I think they thought you'd ride in and save everything like always, but you didn't. And I guess I get why. That was the last message I got from him. On Thursday, the locks changed. I didn't go. I didn't drive by. I didn't want to see the house stripped bare. The porch light off. The windows shuttered like the ghosts inside were finally gone. I didn't need to. The place had stopped being my home a long time ago. I heard later through Aunt Lisa that my parents were staying in a cramped apartment on the other side of town. A friend of theirs from church had helped them with the first month's rent. Daniel had finally picked up part-time work stocking shelves. My dad had applied for early retirement. And Mom, well, she wasn't doing great. Apparently, she cried a lot. Said she didn't recognize herself anymore. And I get that. I really do. Because when everything you built was propped up by someone you treated like disposable furniture and then they finally walk away, what else is there to look at but the wreckage? I never replied to her last message. I never sent them money. I never visited the apartment. Instead, I focused on my life. I got promoted a few months later. I started dating someone kind who listened when I talked and didn't expect me to fix their world for them. I took a solo trip to Italy, ate too much pasta, and sat in quiet cafes writing in a journal I hadn't touched in years. I started therapy. I started living. One afternoon, while walking home from work, I passed by a little bookstore and saw a sign in the window. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing yourself. And I stopped, stood there for a long time, because that was it. That was the whole story. I didn't walk away to be cruel. I didn't let the house fall just to teach them a lesson. I chose myself for the first time in decades. I chose peace over obligation, freedom over guilt, healing over dysfunction. And for anyone reading this who thinks they owe people just because they share DNA, you don't. You owe yourself love. You owe yourself peace. And sometimes choosing those things means walking away from the people who never valued you to begin with. I chose me and I don't regret it for a second. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Hey Reddit, I've been thinking about sharing this for a while. It's something that's still on my mind and honestly, I can't believe how bad things got. So, a bit about me. I'm Zach, 29 years old. I grew up in a small town, and let's just say things were never easy. My family, well, they're your typical group of chaotic, entitled people. But up until last year, they were just another set of characters I had to deal with on the holidays. Let's just say I've had my share of weird family gatherings. but nothing quite like the Thanksgiving that changed everything. Before this all happened, I was your average guy. I worked a regular 9-to-5 job at a tech company, lived in a modest apartment, and kept to myself for the most part. Things changed, though. You see, a few months ago, I stumbled upon a massive opportunity at work. It was one of those once-in-a-lifetime situations where I had a chance to work on a project that ended up paying off in ways I didn't expect. Long story short, I ended up making a lot of money from it, like millions of dollars. I didn't tell anyone about it, at least not at first. I wanted to enjoy my success quietly without people hounding me for handouts. But, well, that was before Thanksgiving. It all started innocently enough. My family invited me over for the usual turkey dinner. I didn't think much of it. I hadn't seen them in a while, so I figured it would be good to catch up. Plus, my aunt was always trying to outdo herself with her cooking, so I figured I could stomach the awkwardness for a good meal. I show up at my aunt's house, and already the tension is thick. I can tell everyone's been gossiping about something, but I had no idea what it was. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and immediately sense that something's off? That was me. I sat down and tried to ignore it. As dinner progressed, it was all normal enough, except for the fact that people kept sneaking glances at me, and I couldn't help but notice the way some of my relatives kept whispering amongst themselves. Then my cousin Sarah, who I hadn't spoken to in years, leaned over and casually asked, "So, Zach, I hear you've been doing pretty well for yourself lately, huh?" I froze. I didn't know how she'd found out, but before I could even respond, my uncle chimed in, "Oh, yeah, we've heard about your big promotion. How's that working out for you? Must be nice to have money to throw around." I forced a smile and nodded, not wanting to get into the details. "It's good. You know, things have been great at work." But of course, that was just the beginning. My aunt, who's always had a way of asking too many questions, leaned in and said, "So, how much money are we talking about here? Zach, you've been keeping it a secret for so long. I bet you could help us all out with a little extra." I wasn't sure how to react. It was as if all these people I hadn't really seen in months or years, had just assumed that my financial success meant I owed them something. At this point, I was still trying to stay calm. I just shrugged it off. "No, it's not like that. I'm just doing my job. Nothing special." But the whispers didn't stop. My cousin Sarah suddenly stood up. "Well, come on, Zach. We're family, right? Surely you can share some of that wealth. I mean, everyone's been struggling lately. Some of us have bills to pay, you know?" The whole table went quiet. Everyone's eyes were on me now. The subtle hints turned into full-on demands. "You could pay off my mortgage," my uncle said, as if it was no big deal. "I've been behind on payments for months now. Maybe you could help me out with that. I'm sure Zach could chip in for the kids' college tuition," my aunt added, her voice dripping with entitlement. "I mean, it's the least he could do." I was stunned. My family had always been dysfunctional, but this was next-level entitlement. It was as if they all thought that just because I had money, I should be their personal bank. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why didn't you just shut it down, Zach? Trust me, I wanted to, but I didn't know how to react. I mean, these people were family. How could they just come out and say this stuff? It was surreal. I tried to brush it off, but it didn't work. Sarah, sensing that I wasn't giving her the reaction she wanted, leaned closer. "I mean, it's just a loan, right? You can pay it back when you can. It's not like we're asking for a handout or anything." That's when I snapped. I put my drink down, stood up, and looked around the table. I wasn't going to let them think they could just walk all over me. "Actually," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I have a better idea." Everyone went quiet. I could tell they weren't expecting that response. "What do you mean?" my uncle asked, raising an eyebrow. I smiled, leaning in just a little. "Well, how about instead of paying off your debts, I give you all something much more valuable. The opportunity to learn how to not end up in this situation again. I think it's time for you to figure things out on your own. No handouts, no quick fixes, just hard work and responsibility like everyone else." My aunt gasped. Sarah looked at me like I was crazy. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. "You can't be serious. We're family. You can't just leave us hanging like this." I didn't answer. I simply turned and walked out of the room. I could hear the arguments starting up behind me, but I didn't care. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let them take advantage of me. But this was just the beginning. I thought walking out would be the end of it, but I was wrong. My family wasn't going to let me off that easily. The next few days after Thanksgiving were a blur. I was getting bombarded with texts and calls, mostly from Sarah and my aunt. They weren't happy. In fact, they were furious. Sarah started with the texts. "What is your problem? You think you're better than us now? I thought you were family. You've changed, Zach. I can't believe you do this." Then came the guilt trip from my aunt. "You're being so selfish. We've been there for you your whole life, and now you can't even help us when we're struggling. It's shameful." I didn't respond at first. I didn't want to get sucked back into their drama. But eventually, after a few days of this nonstop harassment, I figured it was time to call Sarah. I needed to set some boundaries, and if she wasn't going to respect them, I'd have to be more direct. "Hey, Sarah," I said when she picked up the phone, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Zach, finally, you pick up. You've been ignoring me for days. I'm done with your little game. You owe us." "No, you owe me." She sounded almost unhinged. "I didn't come to you for a handout. I came to you for help because I thought you cared. You think you can just walk away from all of us, Sarah?" I interrupted, trying to stay calm. "You don't get it. I don't owe anyone anything. Just because I'm doing well for myself doesn't mean I have to bail you all out of your mistakes. You don't get to guilt-trip me into doing something I don't want to do." Her voice grew louder. "You're just like them. You've changed, Zach. You've become some cold-hearted, selfish person. You think you're better than us now? Well, newsflash. You wouldn't have anything if it weren't for us. We helped raise you. We helped you get this far." I felt my patience start to wear thin. "That's not true, Sarah. Yes, you were there when I was growing up, but that doesn't mean I owe you forever. It doesn't give you the right to come into my life and demand money." "But we're family," she screamed. "You can't just forget about us. I'll never forgive you for this." I let out a deep sigh, feeling the weight of the conversation. "I'm not forgetting about you. I'm just saying no. I'm not your ATM, and I'm not going to let you guilt-trip me into thinking I should be." There was a long pause on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. "Fine," Sarah finally spat, her voice dripping with venom. "But don't think this is over. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you really are." And with that, she hung up. I sat there for a few moments, feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief. What had just happened? I was trying to set some boundaries, and instead of respecting them, she was threatening me. As if things weren't already bad enough, a few hours later, my aunt called. She was far more diplomatic than Sarah, but just as persistent. "Zach, sweetheart, I really think you've misunderstood the situation," she said, her voice saccharine. "We're all family, and we've always been there for you. It's just hard for us to understand why you'd shut us out now when we need you most. It's not about the money, darling. It's about us being together. You've always been so generous, so why are you being like this now?" I knew where this was going, and I wasn't having it. "Aunt Linda, I'm not a bank. If you want to talk about being together, we can. But I'm not giving anyone a cent. I'm sorry you can't see that." There was a brief silence on the other end before she spoke again. "You're making a huge mistake. You'll see. We'll figure something out, but you'll regret this." Regret? The only thing I regretted was not standing up for myself sooner. I ended the call and put my phone down, hoping it would all blow over, but I knew deep down it wouldn't. Sarah had already made it clear this was far from over. The next few days were filled with more attempts at manipulation. Calls, texts, even a few passive-aggressive posts on social media. Sarah started sharing things about me with the rest of the family, and I could hear the whispers growing louder. They were painting me as the villain, the greedy, selfish cousin who had forgotten where he came from. But I wasn't going to give in. Not now. Not after everything I had worked for. I spent the next few weeks laying low, focusing on my work, and ignoring the endless family drama. I didn't even attend the next family gathering. The texts slowed down, but they never stopped entirely. And then came the final straw. One day, I got a call from my mom. She sounded frantic. Zach, where are you? Your aunt and Sarah are here and they're furious. They're demanding you pay up. You need to talk to them. I froze. The situation had escalated to this point. They're threatening to tell everyone that you don't care about your family, my mom continued. They said they'll make your life miserable unless you give them what they want. That was it. I was done playing nice. I wasn't going to let these people tear me down anymore. I made a decision right then and there that would change everything. I smiled to myself and replied, "Don't worry, Mom. I actually have a better idea." The decision had been made. I knew it was time to stop letting my family dictate my life and get even for everything they had done. But I needed a plan. I couldn't just hand them the money and hope they'd leave me alone. No, this needed to be something bigger. Something that would force them to see that they couldn't walk all over me anymore. The next few days were intense. My mom had stopped calling, but I knew Sarah and Aunt Linda weren't going to give up. I could almost feel their pressure building, their sense of entitlement festering. I could hear Sarah's voice in my head. "You'll regret this, Zach. You'll see." But I didn't care. The more they pushed, the more determined I became. I wasn't going to let them win. The opportunity came when I received a text from Sarah inviting me to another family gathering. "You're not getting out of this one. We need to talk. You owe us an explanation. The family deserves to know what you're really about." I stared at the screen. I started getting angry. She was still playing the victim, acting as though I had done something wrong. I knew this was my chance to confront them, to make them realize I wasn't the person they thought I was. So I went. The gathering was at my aunt's house, a few miles outside the city. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I had a feeling it wouldn't be a peaceful conversation. As soon as I walked through the door, the tension was thick. Sarah and Aunt Linda were sitting at the kitchen table, their arms crossed, their faces twisted in anger. Well, Sarah sneered as she looked me up and down. "You decided to show up. Let's see if you've got the guts to say it to our faces." I took a deep breath and walked into the room. "I'm here, aren't I?" I said calmly, my voice steady but firm. "And I'm not leaving until we get this sorted out. So, let's talk." Aunt Linda stood up slowly, her expression full of disbelief. "Zach, you don't understand. We've always been there for you. We raised you. You're acting like you're above us now. All we've asked for is a little help, and you won't even do that. You're turning your back on your family." I shook my head. "You're missing the point, Aunt Linda. I don't owe you anything. You weren't there for me the way you think you were. I don't owe anyone a dime just because I've worked hard to get where I am." Sarah stood up, her face red with fury. "You think we're all just a bunch of beggars? You think we don't deserve any help? You've changed, Zach. You're not the person I used to know. You used to care about us. Now you just think you're better than us." I could feel the heat rising in my chest. The frustration, the anger, the sense of betrayal. It was all bubbling to the surface. "You don't get it, Sarah. I didn't change. I just woke up. You and Aunt Linda are so used to me being your safety net that you think I owe you forever. But I don't. I'm not your ATM, and I'm not your charity case. You need to figure out how to stand on your own 2 feet instead of constantly trying to drag me down." Aunt Linda's face twisted with rage, her eyes flashing. "You ungrateful little brat. You wouldn't be where you are if it weren't for us. You wouldn't even be alive if we hadn't been there for you. And this is how you repay us." I took a step forward, my voice low and controlled. "You didn't do anything special. You were just family. You weren't my saviors. Aunt Linda, you helped raise me. Yes, but that doesn't mean I owe you the rest of my life. And Sarah, you need to get over the idea that you can just come to me whenever you're in trouble and expect me to fix it. I'm not your father and I'm not your bank account." Sarah's face turned bright red. "You think we'll just sit here and take this? You think we'll let you walk away without consequences?" I took another deep breath. "You've made it clear you don't understand boundaries. You think you can walk all over me, but it's not going to happen anymore. You want to make me the villain? Fine, but know this. If you want my help, it's going to come with a price. I'll give you something, but you won't like it." Aunt Linda's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled. my eyes locking onto hers. You'll see soon enough. I could feel the tension rising in the room. Sarah and Aunt Linda were both waiting for me to make the next move, expecting me to cave or back down. But I wasn't going to do that. I had one more card to play, and I played it. I pulled out my phone and tapped a few buttons. A moment later, I handed it over to Aunt Linda. "Here, this is my proposal," I said coolly. She took the phone, glancing down at the screen. Her eyes flickered over the content, confusion slowly turning to realization, then anger. "What is this? A contract? You're going to—" "Yep," I interrupted, feeling a rush of satisfaction. "It's a contract. If you want money from me, you're going to have to work for it. I'm not giving you a handout anymore. You want to fix your problems? You can start by doing something productive for once. Sign the contract and I'll consider it, but no more freebies. You'll work for it." Sarah's face twisted with disgust. "You think we're going to work for you? You think we're your employees?" I gave them a cold, satisfied look. "No, I think you'll either sign the contract and start taking responsibility for your lives, or you'll keep crying about how I owe you everything. The choice is yours." There was a tense silence in the room. Aunt Linda stared at the screen in disbelief, her face pale. "You can't be serious." I crossed my arms, the smile on my face growing wider. "Oh, I'm dead serious." At that moment, the door opened and my mom walked in. She looked between us, clearly confused by the tension. "What's going on in here?" Aunt Linda looked up at her, her voice shaking. "Zach is threatening to cut us off completely if we don't sign this ridiculous contract." My mom glanced at me, her eyes filled with concern. "Zach, what is this?" I turned to her, my tone still calm but firm. "I'm not letting them guilt-trip me anymore, Mom. They want something from me? Fine, but they're going to work for it. If they can't respect my boundaries, then they don't get to keep playing the family card." My mom shook her head, her voice tinged with disappointment. "You're taking this too far, Zach. This isn't how we do things." But I wasn't listening anymore. I was done being manipulated. Just as Aunt Linda started to open her mouth to argue, I cut her off. "The contract's on the table. You can take it or leave it, but know this. If you choose to walk away, you'll never see a dime from me again." I watched their faces as the words sank in. The room was thick with tension, the air charged with unspoken threats. The drama had reached its boiling point, and I could see it in their eyes. They knew this was the moment that would define everything. Would they take the deal, or would they walk away and forever lose the chance to get anything from me again? And then, just as I was about to walk out the door, Sarah spoke up. "I'll sign it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her, a smirk tugging at my lips. "You'll sign it," I repeated. "But remember, this is only the beginning." The room was dead silent after Sarah spoke those words. The tension was palpable. Aunt Linda looked like she might explode, her face turning a shade of red I didn't even know was possible. Sarah, on the other hand, stood with her shoulders slumped, clearly not expecting me to call her bluff. But I wasn't backing down. I held out the phone with the contract in front of Sarah. "Good, but you better read the whole thing. It's not just some formality. This is your chance to fix everything, but it comes at a cost. No more free rides. You want something from me? You'll work for it." Sarah snatched the phone from my hand, glaring at me. I could see the gears turning in her head. She wanted to fight it, to scream, to throw a tantrum, but she also wanted that money, and she wanted it bad. "I'll sign it," she muttered. Aunt Linda, still fuming, finally broke her silence. "You think this is funny, Zach? You think you can just walk in here, throw money around like it's nothing, and treat us like employees?" She was practically trembling with rage now. "We're family. We've always been there for you, and now you want to treat us like we're beneath you." I didn't flinch. "You've always been there for me? That's funny because the only time I ever saw family from you was when you needed something. So now I'm making you work for it. There's no such thing as a free lunch. If you can't handle it, then don't sign the contract and keep living in your fantasy world where you think I owe you everything." Aunt Linda's eyes were wide with disbelief. For a second, I almost thought she might cry. But instead, she stormed toward the door. I don't need your money, Zach. I don't need your charity. You can keep your contract. I'm done here. She slammed the door behind her, leaving a heavy silence in the air. I glanced at Sarah, who had already started scrolling through the document. Her brow furrowed. She was obviously mad, but I could tell she was starting to realize I wasn't bluffing. I'm not signing this, she finally said, shaking her head. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, you're not. She looked me dead in the eye. No, I'm not. You want to play hardball? Fine, but I'm not your puppet, Zach. You don't get to control me. I was done with this. Done with their manipulation. Done with their threats. They thought they could walk all over me because I had money. Well, they were about to learn the hard way that this game wasn't going to go the way they expected. I stood up straight, walking toward the door. That's fine, Sarah. If you don't sign, then I guess that's it. You'll never see a dime from me again. And you can tell Aunt Linda the same thing. Your entitlement got you this far, but it won't get you any further. Sarah stood there frozen. The room felt like it was spinning around me, but I didn't care. The emotional weight of the years of manipulation, guilt, and financial demands had finally lifted off my shoulders. I felt lighter, freer, more in control than I ever had before. I walked out the door, and as I did, I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction. I had finally taken control. For years, I had been the one giving, the one compromising, the one constantly expected to bend to their whims. But that was over. I had drawn the line, and I wasn't going to let them cross it anymore. The next few weeks were tense. My mom tried to reach out, asking me to reconcile with Sarah and Linda, but I held firm. I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to give in. They would either come to me with respect or they wouldn't come at all. And in the end, they didn't come at all. It took months before I got another message from Sarah, but when I did, I could tell she had been humbled. The tone of the message was entirely different. Zach, it said, I know I messed up. I want to talk. I understand now what you were trying to do, and I'm ready to work with you, not against you. Can we meet? I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to just block her number, to walk away and leave them in their mess. But another part of me wanted to see if Sarah had really changed, if she was finally ready to take responsibility for her own life. I thought about it for a while before typing a simple reply. Let's talk, but on my terms. A few weeks after Sarah's message, I met her at a coffee shop. It wasn't some grand gesture or emotional reunion, just a simple conversation where we laid everything out on the table. I wasn't going to make it easy for her, and she knew that. I wasn't interested in empty apologies or promises that she wouldn't keep. She admitted she had been wrong, that she had let the idea of my money cloud her judgment, and that it wasn't just me she'd been treating like this. She'd been pushing other people away, too, all in the name of getting what she thought was owed to her. I could tell she was genuinely remorseful, but I wasn't going to rush into trusting her again. I get it, Zach, she said, her voice soft but firm. I was being entitled, and I'm sorry for everything. I want to earn your trust back, not just take from you. I took a deep breath. It's going to take time, Sarah. I'm not going to give you a dime unless you prove you've changed. You have to do the work. It's the only way I'll even think about helping you. She nodded, and I could see she understood. There was no magic fix here, no quick resolution. We both needed to rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't going to happen overnight. Aunt Linda didn't reach out after that, and I didn't care to hear from her. I wasn't about to fall into the trap again where I was expected to fix everything just because I had the means. I learned my lesson the hard way. Months passed, and things slowly shifted. Sarah did come through on her end, working hard to prove she was serious about changing. She took on a job she'd never considered before, one that didn't rely on handouts or family connections. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. And slowly, bit by bit, she began to rebuild her life on her own. I'm not saying everything is perfect now. There are still moments of tension, still the occasional awkward silence when we're all together, but we've moved past the entitlement and manipulation. I've learned to set boundaries, and they've learned that I'm not someone they can take advantage of anymore. In the end, it wasn't about the money. It was about control. Taking back control over my own life, my own choices, and how I let others treat me. And maybe, just maybe, it helped Sarah realize that money isn't everything. Respect, honesty, and hard work are. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My dad used my daughter's college fund to buy himself a jet ski. When she cried, he said, "Life's not fair, princess." I calmed her down, and that same day we left their house for good. By morning, a letter from my lawyer was already on its way, and then Dad got the real news. I don't really remember what my dad said first, just the moment my daughter's face fell when he walked in wearing that ridiculous red life vest, dragging a jet ski keychain in his hand like it was a trophy. She was sitting at the kitchen table doing a worksheet from one of those college prep books I got her at Goodwill. She'd been filling out practice essays all week, trying to stay focused, trying to believe the future was still intact, even though everything else had washed away. 3 weeks earlier, we lost our house in the flood. Not just the roof and drywall, but everything that made it home. Her childhood drawings framed on the hallway walls, my husband's old guitar, the one he left behind when cancer took him gone. We didn't even have time to grab a change of clothes. My daughter kept asking if the box of letters she wrote to her dad was still floating somewhere out there. I never answered. With nowhere else to go, we moved in with my parents. At first, it felt like a blessing. A bed, a roof, hot water. But the second weekend, the dynamic shifted. My mother started leaving lists on the counter. Chores, meal prep, grocery contributions. I was working part-time at a diner just to cover gas and lunch money. But nothing I did was enough. She'd sigh dramatically every time my daughter poured a glass of milk. Dad would mention how much electricity 2 more people added to the bill. One night, I overheard them in the hallway saying we were freeloading. They didn't know I was awake, but we stayed because I didn't have another choice. I told myself it was temporary, that I could endure it, that it would all be worth it once we got back on our feet. I held on to the idea of my daughter going to college using the $15,000 I'd saved for her over the years. Birthdays, tax refunds, side jobs. Every dollar I didn't spend on food or rent, I put into that account. It was my promise to her. That promise shattered the morning my dad strutted in like a teenager with a new toy. He started talking about lake weekends, how he got a killer deal, how you only live once. He held out the key and said, "Want to see it?" Thought he was joking. But then my mom chimed in, said, "Well, it's not like that money was doing any good just sitting there." My stomach dropped. I asked them what money. She looked at me like I was slow. The money, the college fund. They'd taken it without asking, all of it. My dad said they deserved it after housing us for free for over a month. That we'd racked up costs, that meals, showers, and laundry weren't charity. He actually said, "You two should be thanking us." Then he laughed and told my daughter, "Life's not fair, princess." She looked like someone had slapped her. She'd worked so hard. She'd given up everything without a single complaint. I watched her try to stay composed. But when the tears came, I didn't stop her. I just walked over, took her hand, and led her upstairs. We packed everything we had, 2 duffel bags and 1 plastic tub filled with the waterlogged remains of our life. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't explain. I just texted the one person I never thought I'd turn to again. My older brother. We hadn't spoken in years. He'd cut off contact with our parents after some blowout I was never allowed to ask about. I always thought he was being dramatic, but now I understood. He replied within minutes. Said one word, "Come." We were at his doorstep by midnight. He opened the door before I even knocked. My daughter ran into his arms like she'd known him her whole life. He made up a bed for her, gave me coffee, and didn't ask a single question until morning. Then he asked how much they took. When I told him, he nodded once and said, "I know a guy." That afternoon, a formal letter from his lawyer was sent to my parents. By the next morning, they were about to find out that the jet ski wasn't the only thing that came with a price. By the time my mom called me, the letter had already been delivered. She didn't bother with a greeting. She just launched into a tirade about how I had humiliated the family, how I was twisting things, how involving a lawyer over something she called a minor misunderstanding made me vindictive. I held the phone away from my ear until she paused long enough to breathe. Then I said only one thing. You stole from your granddaughter. There was this moment where everything on her end went silent, like the line had frozen. And then she hung up. My brother was in the kitchen drinking coffee when I set my phone on the counter. He didn't ask what she said. He just slid a folder toward me. Inside were copies of the paperwork Beth, his lawyer, had already filed. I stared at the pages, stunned by how official it all felt. Unauthorized withdrawal, fraudulent representation, damages, words I'd never imagined using against my own parents. Beth wasn't the warm type. She never softened her tone for the sake of comfort. So, when I asked her whether there was any real chance of getting everything back, she didn't sugarcoat it. She said, "You're getting the 15, and after what they pulled at the bank, you'll probably get 10 more. I hadn't expected that. I'd only hoped for the original amount, nothing extra. Hearing her say it so confidently made something unlock inside me. Something I didn't realize I'd been holding tight for weeks. That afternoon, my daughter played with my nephews in the living room while my brother's wife, Lacey, helped her make bracelets out of bright plastic beads. The sound of kids laughing drifted through the house in a way that felt foreign after everything at my parents' place. My daughter kept glancing at me like she was waiting for someone to yell at her for having fun. I kept giving her these small nods, letting her know she didn't have to be afraid here. My parents didn't stay quiet for long. 2 days later, messages from my dad started appearing. Paragraphs demanding I stop the nonsense. Claims that I'd overreacted. Threats about ruining his reputation at the lake. And then at the bottom, this line that made my brother let out a disbelieving laugh when I read it aloud. He said he'd press charges against me for stress. We ignored him. Instead, Beth filed the next set of documents. It wasn't aggressive. It was factual. A demand for the return of the entire amount plus damages. A payment deadline notification that if they failed to comply, we would move forward. That night, as if on cue, my mom pulled up in my brother's driveway. She stepped out of the car holding a plate of banana bread like it was some peace treaty carved into baked goods. She didn't knock. She rang the doorbell 5 times, fast and frantic. My brother answered. I stayed in the hallway out of sight. From the window, I watched her talk with that forced smile she reserved for strangers she wanted to impress. She held out the plate. He barely glanced at it. He just shook his head and said something short. She stood there frozen for a moment before turning and walking back to her car, slower than she'd arrived. Hours later, when everything was quiet, my daughter asked if we'd ever live with Grandma and Grandpa again. I told her the truth. No, we won't. She nodded and went back to arranging her dolls. She didn't ask why. I waited until she fell asleep before I let myself cry. The next morning, Beth called with an update. My parents had hired a lawyer. He'd sent a letter requesting a compromise. They offered to return $5,000 and insisted I sign a non-disclosure agreement so no one else in the family would hear about any of it. It was insulting, desperate, and pointless. My brother listened to Beth, read the offer aloud, and shook his head. Not a chance. We sent no response, not even a rejection. Because the next phase wasn't about settling quietly. It was about forcing the truth into the light, whether they wanted it or not. Started slow. First, it was just a couple of missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Then came a voicemail from my cousin Melissa, who I hadn't talked to since her baby shower 2 years ago. Her voice was hesitant, like she didn't know what she was allowed to say. She said my mom had called her trying to clarify things before rumors spread. Melissa wanted to know if it was true that I was suing them. I didn't answer her message. I didn't need to. That afternoon, Beth filed a motion requesting bank surveillance footage and a transcript of the call my parents claimed they made to authorize the withdrawal. She already knew what she'd find. Nothing. There was no permission, no record of consent. My parents had walked into the bank, spoken with someone they knew personally, and lied. And now the bank was starting to sweat, too. My brother's lawyer warned us things would get messier before they got better. And they did. 3 days after the motion was filed, my dad showed up at my brother's workplace. Just walked in like it was casual, like they hadn't spoken in 5 years. He asked to speak to him privately. My brother told the receptionist to call security. He never got near him, but that same night, my dad posted a long, dramatic message on Facebook, something about betrayal, about how certain family members had chosen greed over love. He hinted that I was brainwashed, that I'd let money come between us. Then he wrote that he'd always tried to help his children even when they didn't deserve it. People started commenting. Family members, old church friends, some neighbor I barely remembered. Most of them didn't know what was going on, but they'd read the post and assume the worst. A few messaged me privately to get my side. I ignored them. The only person I responded to was my Aunt Laura. She sent a one-line message. "Tell me what happened. I won't judge." So I told her all of it. She didn't write back right away. But later that evening, she commented on my dad's post. Just 2 words. "You lied." It blew up from there. My mom made her own post. The next morning, a long defensive rant about how they'd sacrificed everything for me and my daughter, and that we'd taken advantage of their kindness. She framed the stolen college fund as a reimbursement and called the lawsuit an attack on family values. I didn't say a word publicly. I didn't have to. Beth called me that afternoon. Her voice was sharper than usual. She told me the bank had responded to the motion faster than expected, and it was worse than she thought. The manager who'd authorized the withdrawal was a friend of my dad's. The entire transaction had been pushed through without the standard checks, based solely on the manager's word that my dad was allowed. They bypassed 2 verification steps. No documentation, no recorded permission, nothing. Beth was furious. Said it had opened up something much bigger. Said the bank itself might be liable now. And that's when things turned. The next day, their lawyer reached out again, this time with a completely different tone. No more negotiation, no smug conditions, just a brief note asking if we'd be willing to discuss a full repayment and possible damages in exchange for a mutual NDA. Beth said no. She told them we'd see them in court. And then she called in a press contact. I didn't know this at the time, but my brother had a friend who worked for a local news outlet. The kind of stories they loved were ones about regular people being taken advantage of, especially when a respected local bank was involved. 2 days later, a story went up online. Daughter loses home in flood. Then parents use her child's college fund to buy jet ski. My name wasn't in it. Neither was my daughter's. But the details were obvious enough that half the town knew who it was about. I got a message from my old boss, then my high school history teacher, then a neighbor from 3 houses down when I was 13. I didn't read the comments, but I saw the view count. 10,000 in the first 12 hours. That night, my parents didn't post anything. They didn't call. They didn't show up. And for the first time since this started, the silence felt like progress. The silence didn't last. 3 mornings after the article went viral, Beth called me with news. The bank had offered a settlement. It wasn't just about my money anymore. Turns out the employee who approved the withdrawal had been part of a handful of exceptions made over the years, mostly for older clients or people with connections. The problem was none of those exceptions had ever been audited. He'll know. My dad had triggered something much bigger than he realized. Beth read the numbers over the phone. The full $15,000 was funded immediately, an additional $10,000 in damages from the bank directly, and another internal review that might lead to action against the manager involved. It was done. The money was coming back. Every last cent and more. But then something happened I didn't see coming. That same evening, my dad was taken in for questioning. Not arrested, not yet. But someone from the bank had reported irregularities. And because he'd signed off on paperwork with false information, it wasn't just a civil matter anymore. It was financial misconduct, fraud. And the worst part, he wasn't the only one. The manager, his friend, apparently had been letting things slide for years. My dad's withdrawal was just the first one someone had actually challenged. I found out through my brother, who got it from someone on the inside. They were looking at pressing criminal charges against both of them. When my mom found out, she showed up at my brother's house again. No banana bread this time, just a pale face and a trembling voice asking if we could talk. My brother didn't let her in. He told her Beth would be in touch. But later that night, something strange happened. I walked into the living room and found my daughter sitting on the floor with my brother's wife and the boys. She was teaching them a clapping game she used to play in 2nd grade, her face glowing like nothing bad had ever happened. She looked up at me and said, "This is what it feels like to have a real family." I couldn't speak. I walked out to the porch, sat down, and just stared at the sky. My brother joined me a few minutes later, handed me a soda, and said, "You know they're not going to bounce back from this, right?" I didn't answer. I wasn't sure what bouncing back even meant anymore. The next morning, Beth confirmed everything. Settlement finalized, money transferred. The bank had taken full liability. The manager was suspended pending investigation, and charges were likely coming for both him and my dad. Beth asked me if I wanted to sue my parents directly for emotional distress. I told her yes. I told her I wanted every word of what they did to exist in a file with my name on it. And that's when the visits started. First, it was just my mom. She drove past the house slowly. Once she left flowers at the mailbox like we were dead. Then my dad started showing up too. No more loud proclamations, no shouting, just waiting. Sitting in his car across the street like he didn't know what to do anymore. And then the weirdest thing happened. They started bringing food. Casseroles, Tupperware full of pasta, store-bought cookies. They left them on the porch like offerings, never ringing the bell, never staying long enough to be seen. It was creepy, like they were mourning something that wasn't even gone. My brother refused to touch any of it. I threw it all away, but the kids noticed. And then on my brother's birthday, everything came to a head. There was a small party, just family and a couple of his coworkers. Lacey made cupcakes, the kids had balloons, and for once, things felt normal until someone knocked. My brother opened the door. It was our parents, and they weren't holding food. They were holding each other's hands. They stepped inside, uninvited, walked past the guests, and right in front of everyone, dropped to their knees. My mom said she was sorry. My dad looked at me and said he hadn't realized how far he'd gone. The room went dead silent. And even though part of me wanted to scream, wanted to rage, and throw every horrible thing they'd ever done back in their faces, I didn't. My brother looked at me. I nodded. He told them we forgave them. They started to cry, but deep down we didn't. Not really. After that birthday night, after the tears and the public kneeling and the apology that landed like a stone instead of a bandage, something shifted, but not in the clean, redemptive way they probably imagined. My parents started acting like that moment had fixed everything. Like all it took to erase years of manipulation, guilt-tripping, and a $15,000 betrayal was a little humility on a living room rug. They didn't get it. The week after, my mom dropped off a box of board games she said she found in the attic, the ones he used to love. My daughter didn't recognize any of them. My dad sent an email with scholarship links and an article titled, 10 Things Every College-Bound Teen Should Know. He ended it with, "Hope this helps. Let me know if you need anything else." I didn't reply. They weren't evil people. That's the thing. That's what made it all harder. They were just selfish. The kind of people who saw their children's success as a reflection of their own greatness and their children's suffering as something to be tallied against them like a debt. And no apology, not even on their knees, erased what they'd done. Meanwhile, my daughter was settling in like she'd always belonged there. She got a library card, learned how to ride a bike with my nephew, started journaling again. She was lighter. The tension she used to carry in her shoulders, that constant readiness to be corrected or dismissed, was gone. Lacey took her back to school shopping like it was the most normal thing in the world. She even called me from the fitting room to laugh about how my daughter had the exact same stubborn streak when it came to trying on jeans. I cried in the walk-in freezer during my shift at the diner that night. Just a few minutes, no drama. But it hit me. This was what it was supposed to feel like. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Safe. Then a week later, an envelope arrived. Handwritten. My dad's blocky, stiff lettering, 3 pages, no return address, no emotion, just explanations. He wrote that he understood what he did was wrong, that the money wasn't just money, and that he saw now how it had represented something far bigger. Security, love, the future. He said he missed us, that the house was too quiet, that he'd already sold the jet ski to make things right. Enclosed was a cashier's check for $8,000. I stared at it for a long time, not because I wanted it, but because I couldn't believe it existed. My dad, the same man who once said birthdays were for spoiled people, had gone to a bank, waited in line, and voluntarily given something up. I didn't cash it. I put it in a folder behind the court documents and bank statements and printouts from Beth. I wasn't sure what it meant yet. A few days after that, they started showing up again. Not knocking, just parking across the street. Sometimes together, sometimes separately, just sitting there in their car, engine running. Once they left a bag of groceries on the front porch. Another time, a tiny potted plant with a sticky note for her desk. It was like they didn't know how to be people anymore, like they were trying to act out some movie version of redemption, hoping if they hit the right marks, we'd roll the credits and let them back in. We didn't. We were still living at my brother's, and it was starting to show. Not in tension, there was none. But in space, the kids were beginning to overlap each other's routines. My daughter didn't complain, but I could tell she was craving something that was ours. Just ours. One night after dinner, my brother and I sat on the back porch. He handed me a beer and said softly, "You need to start looking." I nodded. I'd known for a while with the settlement money and what I'd managed to save if we had a shot. It wouldn't be big. It wouldn't be fancy, but it would be ours. And that meant something real. We started small. Driving through neighborhoods on my days off. Peeking at for sale signs. Imagining what a room might look like with yellow curtains or a bookshelf by the window. My daughter had questions. Would we have a backyard? Could she paint her room? I didn't make promises, but I let her dream out loud. One day, we passed a tiny white house with chipped siding and a crooked fence. It wasn't much, but she looked at it, then at me and said, "That one looks like it wants us." I laughed. I didn't know if it would work out, but it was the first time in months I felt excited about something without fear biting at the edge. As for my parents, they kept orbiting us, leaving messages, small gifts. Once my mom sent a framed photo of me as a child standing in front of the old lake house. The back was scribbled with, "You were always so bright." That one stung because it reminded me how much brighter I might have been if they'd only let me stay that way. I didn't respond. We were building something else now, something quieter, slower, and if they wanted forgiveness, they'd have to sit in the silence a little longer. We closed on the house the first week of October. It was smaller than I imagined, older too. But it had this strange, comforting feeling, like it had already survived things, like it understood what it meant to be rebuilt. The yard was uneven, the mailbox leaned to one side, and the kitchen tile was cracked straight through the middle. But my daughter stood in the empty living room, spun around once and said, "This is ours." That's what made it real. We moved in with help from my brother and Lacey. Nothing dramatic. A borrowed truck, a few plastic bins, hand-me-down furniture. Lacey brought over groceries, and my brother installed new locks without asking. No one said it out loud, but we all knew it was more than a move. It was a line in the sand. My parents found out 2 days later. They must have driven past the house, maybe saw the porch light on or the sold sign gone. My mom called first. She left a message congratulating me. Said she was glad we were moving forward. My dad didn't call. He showed up. He stood on the front step holding a cardboard box with a broken handle. Inside were photo albums. Mine from when I was a kid. Pictures I hadn't seen in years. Some from birthdays I barely remembered. Others of me and my brother at the lake, laughing, mouths wide, unaware of the years that would come. He didn't ask to come in. He just said, "I thought you might want these." Then he left. I didn't open the box for a week. When I finally did, I found a letter tucked between 2 album pages. It was shorter this time, less about excuses, more about time. He wrote that he couldn't undo what he'd done, but he was sorry he didn't protect me when I needed him most. That the money didn't even matter to him now. That watching my daughter cry had done something he couldn't shake. He ended it by saying, "I hope you'll let us be part of your lives again, but I understand if you won't." I didn't respond. A month passed. Then on my brother's birthday, exactly 1 year after the night we left my parents' house for good, we gathered again. A backyard barbecue, balloons, kids screaming over a new trampoline, Lacey made her famous ribs, and someone brought a cake too big for the table. My daughter wore a dress with sunflowers and gave my brother a handmade card that said, "Thank you for giving us a home." And then they showed up. My parents. They walked through the side gate like they weren't sure whether they were allowed to be there. They didn't bring gifts or food or any of their usual performances. They walked into the center of the yard, past everyone, and then again they knelt right there in the grass. My mom said nothing at first. My dad looked straight at my brother and said, "You were right about all of it." My mom said, "I didn't know how much I hurt her. Thought I was helping." No one moved. The kids fell quiet. My brother stood still for a second, then walked over, pulled them to their feet, and said, "We forgive you." I stood behind him holding my daughter's hand and I nodded. But inside it wasn't forgiveness. Not really. It was closure. A quiet closing of a door that should have shut long ago. One that only stayed open because we were too afraid to walk away. Now we had, and they were left kneeling in the grass of someone else's yard, finally understanding what it felt like to lose something they thought they'd always own. We stayed until the sun went down. My daughter fell asleep in the car on the way home, and when I tucked her into bed that night, she whispered, "We're really okay now, right?" Now on to the next story. Story 8. My brother's kid got drunk at a family meet and told everyone I was just the sad uncle who buys love. The crowd laughed, even his mom. I said nothing. The next day, I canceled his rent payment, his car insurance, and his phone line, all in my name. By Monday, he was couch surfing, phoneless, and begging. Then I shocked everyone with what I did next. It was the kind of evening after which everything changes, even if no one realizes it in the moment. The last night Cody got to feel untouchable. I'd been dreading it all day. Another family dinner at my brother's house. Cheap wine, bad food, fake smiles. I went anyway because I always did. That's who I was in the family. The dependable one. The one who helped with bills when they were behind. The one who paid for Cody's phone, car insurance, and his first apartment just so he could say he was on his own. I pulled up already in a foul mood. Not because of anything specific, but because I knew how it would go. I'd make conversation no one really listened to. I'd bring a good bottle of wine and watch them treat it like boxed red. I'd listen to my brother talk about how hard it was raising a teenager and his wife make subtle comments about how some people don't understand what real responsibility looks like. They never said it directly, but it was always there. That I had money but no family. That I was the uncle with time and cash to spare. And maybe that made me less than them. Cody was already drinking when I arrived, 18. But no one cared. He'd always been allowed to do whatever he wanted. They called it trusting him. I called it enabling. Dinner was as lifeless as I expected. The lasagna was dry. The conversation even worse. Cody got louder with each glass, telling stories that didn't have endings and laughing at his own jokes. Nobody stopped him. Nobody ever had. Then came the moment he raised his glass and said it like he was delivering some grand truth, like he was doing everyone a favor by finally putting it out there. To Uncle Ari, the sad uncle who buys love. It didn't even sting right away. What hit first was the silence after, before the laughter. Like they were all waiting to see if it was okay to laugh. Then they did. All of them. My brother, his wife, even my own sister, shaking her head like it was all in good fun. I didn't say anything. I just sat there staring into my plate. But inside, I was done with all of it. I drove home feeling like a fool. For the money I'd spent, the birthdays I'd shown up for, the emergencies I had covered. It wasn't generosity anymore. It was a joke. I was a joke. By the time I parked in my driveway, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Cody's phone canceled. Insurance gone. Rent not another cent. Let his friends drive him around now. Let him sleep on someone else's couch. Let him feel what life's like when you burn the one bridge that actually mattered. He tried reaching out on Sunday, using someone else's phone. No apology. Just a, "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. Monday morning, my brother called, and that's when it really started because he didn't call to fix anything. He called to remind me of my place. That's when the fuse finally burned down. The call came Monday morning just like I expected. What I didn't expect was how fast my brother dropped the mask. No hesitation. No warm-up. just straight into it like a manager addressing an employee who missed the shift. "So, you really canceled everything?" He didn't even say Cody's name, just everything. Like I'd shut off the heat in the middle of winter instead of cutting a grown man loose. I told him yes calmly. No drama, no explanation, just yes. He let out a sigh, this dramatic, annoyed sound like I had created the mess. He said, "Jesus, Ari, don't you think you're being a little petty?" I didn't answer. I wasn't going to justify it. Then he said something that finally peeled back everything polite between us. "You act like you're some kind of martyr because you throw money around like it makes you better than the rest of us. But at the end of the day, you're still the guy who spends Christmas alone. So don't pretend helping out makes you some kind of hero. You've just been buying your way into this family since the day Cody was born." I didn't respond right away. I let the silence sit there. I'd spent the last decade covering for him. He lost his job in 2017. I covered his mortgage for 4 months. When Cody needed braces, I chipped in half. When they wanted to surprise Cody with a car for his 17th birthday, guess who was asked to just co-sign? Nothing major. All that time I thought I was helping. Turns out they thought I was trying to buy relevance. I told him I was done. He said, "Done with what?" I said, "With acting like this is normal." Then I reminded him of the rental house, a 2-unit property upstate we bought together 10 years ago. A small inheritance from our mother had gone into it. I put up most of the money, but it was supposed to be a joint thing. He'd handle maintenance. I'd handle the books. And for years, he'd quietly pocketed half the rental income like clockwork. I told him I was taking full ownership. I had a lawyer draw up paperwork over the weekend. Buyout offer, notarized, fair price. I told him he could sign or contest it, but either way, it was happening. I wasn't going to keep funding people who turned me into a punchline at dinner. He laughed like it was a bluff. "You're really going to cut your own brother out of the only decent investment he has?" "Yes." His voice dropped. I could hear the shift from arrogance to panic. But before he could finish whatever excuse was coming next, his wife got on the phone. She didn't ease into it either, just jumped straight into a monologue like she'd been rehearsing it for years. She said I was cruel, that I was embarrassing a teenager who looked up to me, that no one in the family ever said I had to give money, and that if I chose to, then it was on me, that I was doing all this not because of what Cody said, but because I was lonely and bitter and couldn't stand seeing a family that actually loved each other. She kept going. She said I was vindictive, that I had no kids of my own, so I was trying to play parent when it suited me and pull out when it didn't. That if I walked away from them, I'd eventually have no one. I listened to every word. Then I said, "You're right. I won't have anyone, but at least I won't be lied to, used, and laughed at by the people I kept afloat." And I hung up. The next day, Cody was officially moved out of his apartment. I'd given the landlord notice. No screaming, no drama, just quiet paperwork. By Friday, he was living back with his parents in the room he grew up in. No car, no phone, no rent money, just a mattress, a second-hand laptop, and a pair of parents who were now suddenly looking at their lives and realizing how many strings I'd been holding up without them noticing. But this wasn't over yet. The real unraveling hadn't even started. By the end of the week, the silence from my brother's house said more than any phone call. I knew they were scrambling. Cody was back under their roof. And from what I heard through the grapevine, mostly my sister, who was still pretending to be neutral, he wasn't handling it well. Apparently, he'd been bragging just 2 weeks ago that he'd never live with his parents again. Independence, adulthood, freedom. Now, he was sharing a wall with their laundry room, getting side-eyed every time he opened the fridge. I didn't feel bad, not even a little. What I didn't expect was how fast the next domino fell. Saturday morning, I got a call from the property manager of our upstate rental, the one I was taking full control of. She said my brother had called her directly, tried to convince her not to make any changes, told her he was still co-owner, and that she needed to ignore anything I sent over until he sorted things out legally. So, I sent him a message, just one sentence: "Any further interference and I'll initiate a formal legal dispute." He didn't respond. That afternoon, his wife called this time. She wasn't yelling. She was calm, calculated. She said, "Look, Ari, I think we all got a little carried away. Let's not burn the whole bridge over a joke. A joke. That word again. I asked her if she understood what I was actually doing. That this wasn't about a joke. It was about the fact that they never once took responsibility for any of it. That I had carried more of their load than they ever admitted. And the first time I said no, they acted like I declared war. She said, "He's your nephew, Ari. Don't you want to see him succeed?" I said, "Not if I'm the only reason he ever will." That's when she started to cry. Real or not, I didn't care. The money from the property meant something different to them than it did to me. To me, it was passive income, a long-term play. But to them, it had become a lifeline. They had budgeted around it, planned vacations with it, covered unexpected expenses with it, and now it was going away. Monday morning, my lawyer sent the final paperwork. Buyout complete, name transfer filed, a full separation, no more shared investments, no more shared anything. I expected more resistance, threats, accusations, maybe even another attempt at guilt, but they went quiet. For a few days, it almost felt like peace. Then my sister sent me a message. It was a screenshot, a group text between Cody and a few of his friends. One of them had written, "Damn, you really living with your parents again?" Another said, "Bro went from solo pad to sharing a bathroom with his mom, Lomeo." Cody didn't respond. I stared at that screenshot for a while, not because I felt bad for him, but because I knew this was only the beginning. That kid was going to learn what the rest of the world already knew. You don't mock the hand that's feeding you, especially when the hand finally closes. And by the time it all settled, they'd be left with nothing but each other, which for once was exactly what they deserved. By the second week, it became clear just how tightly everything had been held together with tape. My brother had always moved like a man who thought he was solid. Like things would always fall into place eventually because they always had. Because someone, usually me, would make sure they did. But without that safety net, reality started peeling back in layers. I went to my niece's birthday party. Not because I wanted to, but because my sister begged me to come, said it would mean a lot. I didn't expect my brother to say anything. I didn't expect Cody to show his face. But both of them were there. Cody barely looked at anyone. He was quieter than I'd ever seen him. Not humbled exactly, just stalled out, like someone who'd run out of clever lines and didn't know how to be a real person. He stood by the drink cooler, scrolling through a scratched-up prepaid phone, one of the burner ones you buy in a gas station. I almost laughed. This was the same kid who used to complain about not getting the newest iPhone every September. His friends didn't come. Not one of them. Word had gotten around that he was back at home. And in that age group, that's social death. They made fun of him in private group chats and voice memos. I didn't need to see it. I already knew. What caught my attention more than anything was the way my brother and his wife acted toward each other. There was a coldness there I hadn't seen before. She stayed on the opposite side of the yard from him most of the time. When he did approach her to ask something, where the napkins were, if she'd seen their younger kids' shoes, she answered without looking at him. Like someone clocking out early from a job they no longer cared about. The fake smiles were gone. All that tight performative family cheer they used to put on in front of guests, gone. You could feel the weight in that backyard. It was the sound of things unraveling quietly behind smiles that didn't stretch far enough anymore. I got home that night to a message from my brother. 2 words. "You win." I stared at it for a while. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a late admission, like he finally realized this wasn't about a joke or a teenager being dumb. This was about years of dependency dressed up as kinship. Years of being told I was part of the family as long as I was funding it. A few hours later, he followed up with something longer. "We can't keep up with the mortgage without the rental income. You knew that." I didn't reply because no, I didn't know that. I didn't know they were that deep. I didn't know that one rental property, one check every month was the difference between survival and panic. And frankly, it wasn't my problem anymore. My sister called me the next day. She told me my brother's wife was furious all the time now, that the tension in the house was thick enough to cut, that Cody's situation was making it worse. Apparently, he tried applying for jobs, but couldn't even get a call back from the local sandwich shop. No car, no degree, no real work history, and a reputation for being lazy. He wasn't exactly a hot prospect. He started sleeping in, staying up all night, getting into fights with his mom over chores. At one point, he tried blaming her for everything. She threw a mug, didn't hit him, but it shattered and she didn't clean it up. This was the house now. Silence, blame, broken glass. Cody had gone from being the smug kid with the apartment and the car and the Instagram lifestyle to just another adult child in his parents' house, hiding behind a closed door. And they couldn't say anything to me anymore because I hadn't cut them off. They burned the bridge with both hands. I thought they'd stay quiet after the mortgage text. I figured they'd sulk, maybe cut me off socially, let pride keep them in check. But a week later, I got blindsided in the most pathetic way possible. I got served not by a lawyer, by Cody. He showed up to my front door in a hoodie and sunglasses, holding a manila envelope. I hadn't seen him in person since the dinner. He looked thinner, or maybe just deflated, like someone who had lost something invisible. He handed it to me without saying a word. Inside, a typed letter, not legal, not official, just a print out of a message he'd written, for pages long. It was titled, "A Formal Request for Support." No joke. He'd outlined in dead serious language how I had knowingly placed him in emotional and financial distress by abruptly severing support systems which had become foundational to his stability. He mentioned developmental damage, abandonment by a paternal figure, and said that if I didn't resume financial assistance, he'd have no choice but to pursue other avenues. At first, I thought it was a prank or a poorly executed legal threat. Then I flipped the last page. It had my brother's name on it, too. They'd both signed it. I laughed. Not a bitter laugh. Genuine disbelief. They were trying to turn this into some kind of moral trial. Like I owed them a defense. Like being the only one who ever wrote checks meant I was now legally required to keep doing it. I didn't respond, but I did do something else. That week, I made a quiet call to the HOA board where my brother lived. I'd helped one of their members out a few years back, alone during a tough divorce. He remembered. I asked if the house was technically in good standing. Turns out it wasn't. They were behind on dues. Not massively, but enough to trigger warning letters. The next board meeting, I attended quietly. I didn't speak, just sat in the back and listened while the unpaid dues were brought up. I never said a word to my brother about it. I didn't need to. By Friday, he'd lost it. He showed up at my place. No Cody this time, just him. His face was red. Not angry, panicked. He started yelling in the driveway, shouting that I was going too far, that this was just family stuff, that you don't destroy your own blood over a few mistakes. I didn't say anything until he stopped shouting. Then I asked him one question. When did you decide that helping you meant you? He didn't answer. He just stood there shaking his head like he didn't know how we got here. And maybe he didn't, but I did. I watched a family rely on me, laugh at me, then resent me for leaving. And in that moment, I realized I was never really one of them. I was their funding source. Nothing more. After my brother stormed out of my driveway, things went eerily quiet. No more texts, no emails, no passive-aggressive messages through my sister. For the first time in years, there was nothing tying me to their drama. And it should have felt peaceful, but something about it felt unfinished. Like I was waiting for a punchline that hadn't landed yet. A month passed then, too. One night, I was out at a bar with a friend from college. We were catching up, talking about nothing important when he asked me if I was still involved with that real estate side hustle, the upstate rentals. I told him I still had one property, but I'd cut ties with the rest. He gave me a weird look, then said, "Funny, I could have sworn I saw a listing under your brother's name." I froze. He pulled out his phone and showed me. It was a short-term rental listing on a niche site, a house upstate, same address as the one I'd taken full ownership of after the buyout, but the profile listed my brother as the property manager, and it was active. Photos, prices, bookings. I checked it myself when I got home. It was real. Somehow, he had found a way back in. I don't know if it was a key he never returned or a side deal he cut with the cleaning service, but he was renting it out under the table. Cash only, off books. Probably thought I'd never find out. I did, and I didn't confront him. Instead, I waited 3 weeks, tracked the listings activity, saved screenshots of every booking. Then I made one final move. I showed up at the rental one weekend with a locksmith and a property manager. The guests inside had just checked out. I had the locks changed, cameras installed, and a notice placed on the door warning that any unauthorized entry would result in criminal charges. Then I waited. He came 2 days later. I watched him from my car as he tried to unlock the front door only to find his key useless. He banged on the door. Then he walked around the back. Then he saw the notice. He didn't call me, didn't text, just drove away. I haven't heard from him since. Cody, last I heard, moved to Phoenix to live with some girl he met online. She kicked him out a month later when she found out he lied about having a job. Now he's living in a shared apartment with 3 guys who all work night shifts and argue over who used whose shampoo. My brother and his wife sold their house. Quietly, moved to a smaller one outside the city. Less mortgage, less pride, less of everything. And me, I kept the rental, cleaned it up, made it something decent, profitable. But more importantly, I made a rule. No family discounts. No, just this once. No unspoken agreements. I still go to the occasional family thing. Birthdays, graduations. I bring a bottle, I eat the food, and I leave when I'm full. Nobody jokes anymore. Nobody laughs too loud. And every time I see them now, I wonder if they remember how it all changed over a single dinner and a single sentence. The night the sad uncle stopped buying love because they finally made him feel it. And that was the last gift I ever gave them. Update. It's been 8 days since I changed the locks and officially ended the last of the mess. I figured that was it. Story over. Nothing left to clean up. But life doesn't care about clean endings. Yesterday, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail like I always do now. When I finally listened to it, I had to replay it twice to make sure I heard it right. It was Cody. His voice was weirdly calm. He said he was in town for a couple days and that he was wondering if we could meet for coffee. He said, "I just want to talk. No BS. I'm not asking for anything." I almost deleted the message, but something stopped me. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I wanted to see if the kid had actually changed or if this was just another performance. We met this morning. Neutral ground, small coffee shop with no history, no memories. I got there early. He came in alone, looking older somehow. Not just tired, humbled. Like the arrogance had been worn out of him. Layer by layer, he sat down and got straight to it. He said he'd been wrong. He said what he said that night at dinner wasn't a joke. It was a test. A messed up, insecure attempt to feel superior for once. That he knew I'd always been the one holding the family up. And that made him feel small. So he tried to make me smaller. But what got me wasn't the apology. It was what he said after. He told me he'd recently found out that his mom had been secretly using my name, my credit, on a second rental application for Cody a year before the fallout. They had faked a cosigner signature using old paperwork from a lease I'd helped them with once. And when the rent fell behind, it had nearly tanked my credit. I had no idea, never saw it, never got a notice. He found out about it 2 weeks ago when he tried to apply for a car loan and the bank flagged it. His mother never told him. He said, "You think you were just the wallet, but it was worse than that. You were the foundation and we built a whole mess on top of you." He left after that. Didn't ask for money. Didn't cry. Just said he wanted me to know the truth. I checked the claim later that afternoon. He wasn't lying. I contacted the property management company. There it was. My name, fake signature, old documentation reused. It's being handled now legally, quietly. But that was the final straw. Not the joke, not the money, not even the betrayal. It was the silence. The assumption that I'd never find out. That I'd never matter enough to notice. Now I do. So here it is. The end of this entire story is simple. They don't get another chance. Not a year from now. Not at a funeral. Not when one of them hits rock bottom and remembers I exist. I've built something on my own and I'm going to keep it that way. No more dinners. No more. Just this once. And if they ever tell the story of the uncle who walked away, I hope they remember this. I didn't walk away from them. They just never realized I was the only one still standing. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.